Chapter 45. Izuku isn't sure why he stays after the day's training is done. He isn't planning on telling, not yet. It's been a lot already, telling Todoroki and coming clean with Ida, and he doesn't regret it, but he needs time, still. He needs to think this through. But All Might is still acting off, and it's not in Izuku's nature to leave things be. His friends pause to wait for him as the class exits the training facility for the day, but Izuku waves them on. Uraraka waves back, Todoroki gives him a nod, and Ida's gentle grip lingers on his shoulder for a moment before he moves on with Tensei trailing hen. Izuku marches in place a bit until the last stragglers, Kaminari and Sira, leave him behind and slips back to where he last saw All Might. The teachers are gathered in discussion, Aizawa-sensei, Cementus, Ectoplasm, and All Might, and Izuku lets his steps fall audibly. All Might sees him approach first. The cast on his arm is still in place, but the sling is gone and the rest of his bandages have been removed. Physically he's been improving, but the loss of bandages doesn't take away the shadows on his face or the curve to his spine. Nana hovers over him, silently worrying, as if she's afraid he'll keel over at any moment. As Izuku approaches, Aizawa-sensei looks up and sees All Might staring. His homeroom teacher follows his gaze until he spots Izuku as well, and his face shifts briefly into something that Izuku can't quite read at this distance. Aizawa glances toward All Might as if expecting something, then rolls his eyes and gives him a light shove in Izuku's direction. All Might's steps stumble a bit toward Izuku's approach, and he glances back at the other teachers with a bewildered look on his face, but they are already moving off. When he turns back to Izuku, the shadows have shifted, and now he looks a bit more shamefaced than simply miserable. What was that about? Izuku asks as he joins his mentor in the rapidly emptying facility. Oh, nothing, All Might says. Aizawa was simply pushing me to do something I've been putting off. He hesitates, picking at the edge of the bandage wrapping on his arm. Ah. Talking to you, to be exact. Pausing again, he heaves a brief sigh. I'm sorry, my boy. I'm sorry I didn't talk to you about this so much sooner. About what, exactly? Izuku asks with a fearful look at Rei and Nana. He can't account for the instinctive fear that rises within him, because there's absolutely no way for All Might to know about that, but he also can't help spooking a little anyway. About your imprisonment, All Might answers as his hands twist together in agitation. We saw each other on the beach afterward, but, well, we didn't really talk. You didn't have the chance to, and considering what you saw and what you went through with All for One, are you all right, my boy? Are you kidding me? Slips out before Izuku can stop it, and he simply gawks at All Might for a second. That's what I've been wanting to ask you. Ah, well, there's really no need to. I know it's been hard, Izuku blurts out, then pulls back. This is dangerous territory he's headed for. If he says too much, he might make things worse. I know you lost the last of your quirk, and you've been forced to retire, and I use the internet, you know. I see what some people say, whether they're mean and critical or just scared, but he swallows painfully. You've been acting off ever since. I'm worried about you. All Might blinks at him, clearly taken aback, then shakes his head. I was afraid of this. It's all backwards. I'm the one who's supposed to be worrying about you, my boy, not the other way around. Fine, it runs both ways. But All Might, I left before you took him down, and I know he kept talking to you while I was gone. He searches All Might's face, then glances to Nana's. Did he say something? Plenty, All Might rasps. In fact, he said plenty while you were still there, remember? He pauses. You were with them for 3 days. Have you talked to anyone about it? Izuku's throat begins to close, and he shrugs. There's nothing to talk about. He's dead, so it doesn't matter. He doesn't matter. All Might's still looking at him, and the weight of his gaze makes Izuku want to grind his teeth against his own words. He lied a lot. He said some things that were true, but it was all twisted to try and push me to his side. He tried to get me to feel bad about myself, and blame myself or you or heroes or the world for things that were mostly his fault. A realization strikes, and he barks out a quiet laugh. Holy, he spent 3 days nicking me, what a creep. All Might huffs out an attempt at a laugh, and his hand falls upon Izuku's shoulder and only trembles a little. Yeah, he does that, Nana murmurs. He has a knack for finding the right buttons to push. It might have worked, Izuku says quietly. I think if I'd been alone, if the ghosts hadn't been with me. If One for All hadn't been with me. If no one had been there, not even Bakugo. Rei slips her hand into his and he squeezes it. I knew he was wrong. I knew he was just playing me. But it was like I needed a constant reminder or I'd forget, and his voice caught in his throat. And that last day, when he had read Doll's quirk. It threw him off and I could just barely slip past him. I don't know if I could have gotten through that by myself. I like to think I could have. But I don't know. You could have, All Might says gently. I have faith in you. I saw how you stood up to him. It terrified me, seeing you so close to him, speaking that way. But I could see in your face, he had no hold on you at all. I was angry, Izuku whispers. He's staring downward, away from All Might's face. I think I was more angry than I've ever been in my whole life. The hand on his shoulder squeezes lightly. No. I could tell. And there was something I wanted to ask you. It's fine if you don't want to answer, but he purses his lips, seeming to brace himself. You said something to him before you ran. That he shouldn't have killed her. I was alarmed when you said that, because I thought it meant the worst for Ragdoll, but when I learned that she was all right, I was relieved but confused. Were you talking about someone else? The truth hovers at the back of his throat, bracing itself to spring forward and fly free. He glances to the side, at Rei, and then at Nana. Rei watches him with steady black eyes, but Nana's eyes are closed, and even from here Izuku can see her trembling. She looks scared. She looks anything but ready. I had this friend when I was younger, Izuku says. His throat feels every bit as rough and dry as sandpaper. Rei's hands are cold, but they don't shake. I met her when I was 5. I've always thought of her like my sister. But something happened to her, and I never knew what until Kamino. Because when I escaped, I found a file on her in that place. I found out what happened, and I was always wondering, but... The hand on his shoulder becomes a hug, and Izuku squeezes back and swallows his guilt over his own cowardice. It's the truth. Not a single word of that was false, but a lie by omission is still a lie. Tell him, he thinks, but he's tired. He told the truth to Todoroki and it ended better than he could have hoped, but it still left him shaky. His conversation with Ida this morning left him drained. I'll tell him tomorrow, he thinks, and wonders bitterly if he'll ever let that tomorrow become a today. Exhaustion hits him in a wave as he finally makes his way back to the dorm common room. His costume is stowed away, his clothes are loose and comfortable, and his hair is damp from the shower he took at the training facility but mostly dried from the walk back. Once inside, he kicks off his shoes and makes a beeline for the couch to flop down on it. The action sends him sprawling limply across Todoroki's lap, and his friend shifts a little and rests the book he's reading between Izuku's shoulder blades. Working hard or hardly working, Midoriya? Kirishima chuckles. Izuku mumbles wordlessly in response. Did somebody say Midoriya? Kaminari calls from another room. There's a flurry of footsteps, multiple people heading toward him, and Izuku raises his head to see Kaminari, Sira, and Ashida scrambling in with Kaminari in the lead. Midoriya, we need a fave, oh. He stops short, and while Ashida manages to swerve to avoid crashing into him, Sira isn't as quick. Wait. You and Todoroki, you guys said you weren't a thing, right? Did that change? Nothing changed, Todoroki says without looking up from his book. We are not dating, Izuku says flatly. We had a conversation and everything. Really? Sira looks skeptical. Cause, no offense, but you guys are kinda touchy-feely right now. And, you know, all the time. Izuku levels a glare at him. The girls are touchy-feely with each other all the time, and I've never seen anyone accuse them of dating. Ashida snickers. He's got you there, Sira. Right, whatever, point taken, Kaminari cuts in before the conversation can derail entirely. Anyway, he turns back to Izuku and clasps his hands together. We wanted to ask you a favor. Could we borrow your cat? And if not, what could we pay you to borrow your cat? Depends on what you're borrowing her for, Izuku answers. If it's for emotional support, that's free. For anything else, it's negotiable and litterbox duty. Zero pulls a face, but Ashida and Kaminari brighten. I'm good with that, Kaminari says, nodding vigorously. But seriously, we just need to borrow her for some art experiments. At Izuku's frown, he waves his hands. It's nothing bad. We just need to check out some things. Bakuga, passing by to head toward the kitchen, makes an irritated noise in the back of his throat. Oh, come on, Bakugo, you just stubborn. Ashida calls after him and gets a middle finger in response. I'm with Bakugo on this, it's done, Jiru deadpans from the other couch. It's not done, Kaminari retorts. If you just pay attention to the evidence, you'd know. There is no evidence. Jiru almost yells, clearly exasperated to the end of the patience. I'm telling you, all this quirk training is messing with your brain. You're a skeptic, Jiru. Ashida shoots back, and Izuku starts to notice the dull squeezing pain of a tension headache. Hey guys, can we play a game, he asks. It's a fun game. It's called the Let's Pretend Izuku Doesn't Know What We're Talking About game. Because I'm lost. The dorms are haunted, Ashida answers promptly. Pretty much. Kaminari's hands go from clasped to almost twisted together. We were hoping to borrow your cat so we could, like, take her around to all the problem areas, you know. See if she reacts to anything. Izuku stares at him, blinking slowly. On the other couch he sees Uraraka and Ida sitting across from Jiru. Uraraka fidgets and avoids looking at anyone. Ida becomes thoroughly absorbed in his English textbook. Tensei looks bewildered. Rei looks far too pleased with herself. Somewhere out of his range of vision, he can hear Hino stifling a snicker. So he starts, then second-guesses himself. You guys want to use my cat as a ghost detector? Sira groans. I knew he wouldn't believe us. I told you. Ghosts aren't real, you dumb fucks. Bakugo bellows from the kitchen. Izuku feels Todoroki tense and sighs heavily. You know what? Fine. Go ahead. She'll have fun. Kaminari brightens. Awesome. Where is she? I dunno, somewhere. Izuku shuts his eyes. Go find her. Don't grab her too hard. She's really easygoing about everything, so if she scratches you then it's your fault. The boys look like they're about to complain, but Ashida hooks arms with both of them and drags them off, shouting a cheery thanks, Midoriya, over her shoulder. Jiru blows a raspberry. Haunted. These dorms were built, like yesterday. All this training must be scrambling their brains. It's silly, but it's not completely out of nowhere, Yaoarosa remarks. It gets drafty from time to time in odd places, and the building is new enough that I hear it settling from very now and then. It is the end of summer, Ida offers, ever helpful. The weather is beginning to change. Buildings often make noise in response to temperature changes. Cool, Jiru remarks. Hey Todoroki, quit messing with the building, you'll give Kaminari nightmares. Okay, Todoroki answers, turning a page. Things quiet after that, and Izuku slips into a light doze. He isn't quite asleep, still distantly aware of things happening around him, but he isn't nearly awake enough to hold any of it in his mind before it slips out again. People chat quietly around him, but he only registers the noise, not the meaning. Eventually, a light shake to his shoulder rouses him. Almost everyone's gone to bed, Todoroki informs him. It's probably more comfortable upstairs. Izuku's jaw cracks as he yawns. Don't sell yourself short, he says, and dawdles on moving until his friend stands up and nearly dumps him off the couch entirely. Sorry, Todoroki says, but there's a bit of humor hovering in his face as Izuku scrambles to salvage some level of balance and dignity. My legs were falling asleep. A high-pitched laugh tells him Uraraka is still here. Izuku looks over to find that she and Ida are the only other students who haven't left yet. Warmth rises within him unbidden. It's nice to wake up surrounded by friends. There, Midoriya, Ida speaks up. Izuku glides over, and for once he doesn't feel self-conscious about shooting a grin at Tensei over his friend's shoulder. I have an awkward question. His eyes flicker to the side, toward Todoroki. It can wait, though. Izuku blinks, confused, then almost smacks himself in the forehead. He's been so euphoric and giddy about telling people that he's forgotten to keep them in the loop about who knows. It's fine, Ida, he says. Everyone in the room knows. Oh. Ida's eyebrows shoot upward and he turns to stare at Todoroki more openly. He told me last night, Todoroki explains. You haven't missed much. We sort of found out by accident when we went to visit Deki's mom, Uraraka says. It was actually, remember how, when we got back, we sort of bullied the rest of you into going to Kamino instead of the new location Momo found out about. I wouldn't call it bullying, Ida says hesitantly. It was ghosts, Uraraka says. Ghosts told us. Wrote it all out on a dusty mirror. Oh, Todoroki says in the tone of voice of someone who was reprocessing a great deal of things previously thought to be facts. And wait, at Kamino, when we were searching for Midoriya and you ran off. Ghosts again, she says. Maybe the same ghost. She kept vanishing and I was ahead of you, so you didn't see her. Todoroki looks back to Izuku now. I thought only you could see them. That's a new development, Izuku says. I'm sort of working on it. And speaking of developments, it doesn't quite account for your strength, Ida adds, and Izuku shuts his eyes. I'm aware that quirks can combine in odd ways, Todoroki is proof of that. But at least his opposing sides both deal in temperature and elements. How does your strength relate to, well, seeing the dead? That is an excellent question, Izuku says slowly. He tries not to look at Todoroki. He remembers his friend's first guess at his connection to All Might, and he has no idea what he must think now. There is a clear and coherent answer to it, I promise, but I can't really say. He sighs. I'm sorry, guys, but it's not just my secret, so I can't answer that. I promise it's nothing bad, but that's not something I can really, talk about. I know it doesn't make sense, but it's fine, Todoroki says bluntly. It's not like we are going to force you to talk. If it's nothing bad, then I don't see the harm, Ida says, a bit reluctantly. Uraraka gives him a thumbs up, and Izuku sighs with relief. Thanks. Oh, sorry, Ida, was there something else you wanted to ask? To his surprise, Ida's face turns a little pink. Right. Well, considering the earlier conversation, I mean, it's a far more valid question than Jiru and the others seem to think, but are the dormitories haunted? The question catches Izuku on an exhale, so his bark of laughter comes out as an almost squeaky wheeze. Izuku looks to a grinning Tensei, then a thoroughly amused Rei, and purses his lips to keep from laughing again. Define haunted, he says. How many ghosts are there right now? Uraraka asks. 2, he says with a cautious glance at Ida. They've had their conversation, but is not sure how willing Ida is to be open about it. His friend's face softens into a smile. It turns out he has nothing to worry about. One of them's Tensei, isn't it? Uraraka gasps sharply, and Todoroki's weight shifts with tension. Yeah. And one of them's Rei, she's a friend of mine. Sometimes there's a third one, but his voice trails off as he looks around, but Hino is nowhere in sight. Is he a friend of yours, too? Uraraka asks, still shooting odd glances at Ida. No, actually, he's kind of a dick, Izuku answers. Tensei snorts loudly, and Rei laughs so hard the light flickers. I first met him at the sports festival, knocking drinks out of Endeavor's hands. It's Todoroki's turn to stifle a laugh, this time. They do head back to their rooms soon after. Izuku's path takes him close by the laundry room, and he hears voices from within. There's a sharp thud, like a door slamming shut, followed by 3 startled yops. Rei darts inside, looking more excited than alarmed, and Izuku peeks in out of curiosity. Ashida, Kaminari, and Shiro are huddled together, or rather, Ashida and Kaminari are huddled behind Shiro. The latter holds Mika out in front of him Lion King style, as if his unruffled one-eyed cat is supposed to shield them all. Before them, the door of one of the cupboards above the washing machines is swinging on its hinges, banging each time it swings shut. Hino's sitting on the washing machine beneath it, looking bored as he does the swinging. Ashida catches sight of him first. You see this, right? She splutters, and that's the moment Hino stops playing with the cupboard door. When Ashida sees it stop moving, just in time for a witness's arrival, she almost screams in frustration. Hino takes one look at Izuku's face and shrugs, thoroughly unapologetic. What? I'm giving the kids what they want. It's too late for this. Izuku is tired enough that he's going to sleep perfectly well alone in the dark of his own room. We have training tomorrow, he tells his classmates. Ghost will still be here in the morning. He turns on his heel, ignoring Kaminari's shout of "that's the problem" as he heads for the stairs. He almost wakes up a little later when his bedroom door opens a crack. But it closes a moment later, leaving him with soft footsteps, a quietly jingling collar, and a warm, vibrating weight against his side for the rest of the night. His alarm wakes him the next morning, and Izuku blinks awake with a feeling of vague satisfaction at having slept through the night. Fumbling, he turns off the alarm, sits up, and nearly falls out of bed. Sorry, Nana says, though she doesn't put as much inflection behind it as she could. I didn't mean to spook you, but we need to talk. The drakes of sleep vanish, and Izuku slips out of bed, fully alert. Nana has a history of climbing up about things she honestly shouldn't, so hearing those 4 words out of her mouth means it's something huge, or she's finally living up to her vow to do better. In Izuku's experience, ghosts don't change easily. Death tends to stagnate a lot of things. With his eyes still clearing, he tries to search her face for some clue about what's troubling her. She was quiet yesterday when he talked to All Might. Did it have something to do with that? He shakes his head. There's no point in guessing when she's about to speak anyway. What's going on? Is All Might okay? He keeps his voice low. Todoroki won't think much of him talking to thin air now that he knows, but he can't say the same for the others on their floor. No, she answers, and Izuku's heart leaps to his throat. I mean, it's nothing immediate. But she sighs harshly. You've seen him, Sprout. He's not doing well. And honestly, I don't know if you, by yourself, can fix it. But you deserve to know what started this at least. She faces him, the worry stark on her face. That's assuming you don't already know. Did One for All tell you about Shigaraki? Izuku frowns, racking his brain. No. Aside from where he was and what he was doing, if I needed to know. Right, Nana murmurs. Okay. She speaks half to herself, as if bracing for what she's about to say. He found me when you sent him out looking for Ray. The first holder of One for All. I only met him once, right after my death. I went to find Toshi. He stayed with his brother, and that was the last I saw of him until he came to lead Ray to you. He told me, well, he thought I already knew, and I don't blame him because, damn it, I should have known. I should never have. She stops, pressing her lips together until they turn white. I might have kept it to myself for good, but then All for One told Toshi after you escaped. He was trying everything by then, just to force him into despair like he did to me. I'm not sure he didn't succeed. Ms. Nana, Izuku says gravely. Please tell me what they said. I had a family, Nana blurts out, as if forcing the words out before she can lose her nerve. A husband and a son, and I couldn't protect them. Dread creeps over Izuku's heart like grasping vines. I made enemies, Nana continues. Every hero does, but my enemies found my family. They killed my husband, and I knew it was just a matter of time before they found Tero, too, and I couldn't raise him alone, not with my duties as a hero and a successor to train and All for One still alive, so I gave him up. Her voice only breaks a little. I pulled every resource I had to find him a foster family, far away from me. I didn't even let them tell me where, because I didn't trust myself to lose heart and go after him. I made Toshi and Gran Torino swear to me that they would never go looking for him. I haven't seen him since. When I died, I tried to search for him, but I didn't even know where to start looking, so I told myself he had a life of his own and I wasn't a part of it anymore, and I stopped looking. And she stops again, lets her head drop into her hands, twists her fingers into her hair. I just found out he had a child, Izuku. He had a son of his own. Tenka, Shimoa Tenka, my grandson. And All for One found him and turned him into Shigaraki Tamura. Izuku feels his blood turn to ice, swift and devastating as Todoroki's quirk. For a moment, he can't even breathe. Mika's twining around his ankles, but he can barely feel her. It was my failure that started it, Nana continues. I should have kept tabs on him. I should have let Gran Torino or Toshi keep tabs on him, but I didn't. It was my failure, mine, but Tashi thinks it's his, and I can't stand by and watch that fester inside of him anymore. Has he talked to Gran Torino? Izuku rusts. He's sitting on his bed again, his legs all but giving up beneath him. Some, Nana says. Not as much as he should. Just to pass the news, but nothing beyond surface level. She sits down beside him, just tangible enough for the bed to dip. Gran's helping spearhead the hunt for the rest of All for One's operation. He won't let Tashi help, and Tashi wants to help so badly it's eating him up inside. He won't talk to Gran about it because neither of them know how to talk about things like that. He won't talk to any of his colleagues, either because he can't without revealing the secret of One for All, or he thinks they are too busy and he'll be a burden. So no one knows what's wrong but you, Izuku murmurs. And I'm the only one you can ask for help. It doesn't have to be you, she says softly. You could ask for help yourself. You could pass it along to someone, Gran, or recovery girl. Maybe even that detective, Sakochi, he always knows what to say to calm Tashi down. No, Izuku says. I mean, maybe. If I'm not enough, then I will. He stops, then tries again. I mean, if we are not enough, then I will. Nana goes quiet. She says softly. Then, you mean? It's time, Izuku tells her. I should have told him long ago, Ms. Nana. You know that. Yes, she says, closing her eyes. I'm gonna need you in my corner, Izuku says. You know that, right? No vanishing, no climbing up. Her hand is cold as it squeezes his shoulder. You can count on me, she says, and there's a steadiness in her face that tells him she means it. From young Midoriya. 7:49 a.m. I need to talk to you today, after training. Somewhat private. It's important and I don't want anyone to overhear. Toshinori has seen this room many times before. It's a small meeting and rec room in UA's halls, soundproof to the outside, devoid of any recording devices, for private discussions that must not be overheard. It's been the perfect place to discuss One for All and all it entails, and now, in a bit of a twist on their normal arrangement, it's young Izuku who has invited him to talk. His fault, of course, Toshinori thinks with no small amount of guilt. There have been so many things on his mind lately, or just one thing that takes up all the space available. He's doing his best not to neglect his students, not to neglect his successor, but so much has changed, and it's left him floundering to keep his head above water. It's evening now. Izuku is done with training, freshly showered and dressed comfortably in street clothes. Toshinori has lost a bit of bandaging every time he's seen his young student. At this point, the cast on his arm is all that's left. At some point Ashida convinced him to let her sign it. Even from across the room, he can see Izuku eyeing the bright purple candy and flowers. He focuses on that for a few seconds. It's a nice bit of silliness to seep through the guilt and regret and frustration that fester within him. Toshinori is sitting down, 2 cups of tea laid out on the table in front of him, like always. For a moment he thinks Izuku is going to stay on his feet, but eventually the boy sits next to him. He takes the cup of tea that Toshinori slides toward him and drinks from it without speaking. The silence gets to Toshinori embarrassingly quickly. I've worried you, he says, shamefaced. Haven't I? It's not your fault, Izuku tells him sullenly. It's all for One's. He knew exactly what he was doing when he said what he did. He wanted to hurt you as much as he could before he went down. It's a brutally sensible thing to say. That doesn't mean it wasn't true, Toshinori says quietly. It means it doesn't matter if it was true, Izuku says. When I was with him, he talked to me a few times. At least once a day, sometimes twice. I hated it because I always left feeling like I forgot which way was up, and I'd have to remind myself all over again. But what helped was he hesitates, as if his momentum has carried him farther forward than he intended. What helped was knowing that he was doing it all on purpose. He started off by lying to me and then promising to tell me the truth, and it didn't matter if he was lying or not because everything he said and everything he did was to get me to do what he wanted me to do and think what he wanted me to think, and when I kept that in my head, I could shut out the rest. When did his successor get so wise? Toshinori glances briefly at him, then turns back with a sigh. I think I see your point, my boy, he says. And I'm grateful. But you don't know what he said to me after you left. The silence that follows is enough to make him nervous. I do, actually, Izuku says. Toshinori stifles a cough, tasting blood in the back of his throat. And before you ask, no, it's not because he told me to. He didn't breathe a word of it to me. He probably didn't think it'd matter to me. Maybe he thought I didn't know about her at all. Toshinori swallows blood and bile and composes himself with a deep and shaky breath. Nana, he murmurs. Gran Torino told you about her, didn't he? He told me because I asked him, Izuku says. But that's not why I know her. And that's odd. The way he worded that is odd, saying I know her in the present tense as if he's met her before. But that's impossible because he's only just turned 16 and she died decades ago. Toshinori shakes his head. This isn't an easy thing to talk about, my boy, he says. Important things never are. There's an almost world-weary note to it, and that doesn't belong in a teenager's voice. Sometimes not being ready for something just isn't a good excuse anymore, and I think we both forget that a lot. Like right now with you, sort of. Toshinori looks at him, confused. You've been avoiding this because it hurts. Izuku won't look at him. His hands curl into fists in his lap, and his eyes are fixed on the tea in front of him. Because you're ashamed and you're afraid of what people will think of you. Maybe you blame yourself and you think everyone else is going to blame you too, so you don't talk about it even when you need to. Even if it might help if they knew. He grits his teeth. She does that too, all the time, and I told you not to copy her. Toshinori goes dead still. This doesn't make any sense. His student has always been an odd one, but this is the first time he's ever said something that made no sense at all. Midoriya. But I can't really hold that against you, Izuku says, and his knuckles are wide against his knees. Because I do it too. I hide things and I lie because it's easier that way even if it's not right anymore. Like with you. I've been lying to you, but I have to stop now because I can't tell you what you need to hear unless you know the truth first. The truth about what? Midoriya. What happened to Shimura Tenko wasn't your fault, Izuku says, and Toshinori forgets the word he was about to say next. You don't know that, he says. He can't possibly know, because Gran Torino never told him that Nana had a child. I do, Izuku says. What were you supposed to do? How were you supposed to find him? She hid him so well even she didn't know where to start looking. She told you not to look, she told you her son would be safer far away from you where villains would never find him. You argued with Gran Torino about it, but in the end you both wanted to honor her wishes. This is wrong. This is all wrong. Toshinori's hands tremble so badly that he has to put his cup down and fight to keep his voice steady. Izuku, he says softly, the name slipping from his wavering tongue. You're scaring me. That's okay, his student whispers. I scare me too, sometimes. You shouldn't know this, Toshinori says. You shouldn't know any of this, because I know for a fact that Gran Torino wouldn't have told you. He didn't tell me, Izuku says. He didn't tell me about Nana. He didn't tell me that All for One killed her. You did, but you weren't the first, because she was. His mind goes blank. What did you say? I know because she told me. The words spill from his student in a rush. Ms. Nana, she told me. She told me everything. Toshinori faces him, dumbfounded. He recovers himself, but only barely. Young Midoriya, she died. It would have been years before you were born when it happened when I was younger than you. I know, Izuku says. But she's still here. She's here, and I can see her, and I can see others like her, because... Young Midoriya, Toshinori's voice trembles. That's what I was lying to you about. I lied about being quirkless because no one ever believed me about the ghosts before then, but she's here, and you deserve to know. Midoriya. He can feel it in every inch of himself, from his mind to his heart to every nerve ending in his body, the overwhelming urge to push back and push away. Because this is unheard of, it's absurd, and he can't, it's not true. It can't be. It's impossible. His student watches him from a few feet away, eyes wide and fists trembling, and Toshinori has to look away. I owe you an apology, he says, fighting to keep his voice steady. I've worried you, and you didn't have to go this far, Midoriya. And no, All Might, wait, but Toshinori shakes his head and forges on. I understand that you're afraid for me, after everything you've been through, but this is cruel, his voice cracks on the last word. It's a cruel thing to climb. You understand why, don't you? I'm not, it's the truth, All Might, this is my quirk. I see ghosts, I see her, she's here right now. That's enough, Midoriya. It's the closest he's come to raising his voice since that night, since he faced All for One for the last time. He rises to his feet, wondering how he'll make it back to the safety of his room when his balance feels so utterly shattered. I'll think about what you've said, but you go too far. You don't get to say that to me. Toshinori goes still, words of denial dying in his throat. His student is on his feet, staring up at him with tears overflowing in his bright, desperate eyes. His fists are so tight that Toshinori wonders if his nails have broken skin. You don't get to say that to me, Izuku almost sees through his tears, but he doesn't look angry, just desperate and hurt and halfway to panic. You came to me when I was nobody, and you told me your secrets. You told me about your scar, and your weakness, and your power, and everything it meant to you. You told me all of that and I listened. I've always listened, and I've always kept your secrets, and you don't get to turn around and call me a liar when I try to tell you mine. Toshinori grinds his teeth. It's not true, it can't be true. Midoriya. I know it's hard. I know you're not ready. I'm not either, and we are never going to be ready. Izuku's eyes well up with fresh tears that he doesn't bother drying. But I can't keep this in anymore, and she doesn't want me to. She wants you to know, All Might, she wants you to know she's still here and she's always been here. She's gone at Midoriya. His shout is every bit as weak and frail as the rest of him, a kitten's meal to the raw it once was, but it still breaks through his student's words. I accepted that years ago. She's gone. She's been gone a long time. I lost her, and it's cruel to wield her memory this way when you only know her by what you've been told. You gave me her words on the beach, the boy cuts him off, and yet again the grief and anger and denial on the tip of Toshinori's tongue go no further. When you gave me One for All. You told me it wasn't a gift or luck, it was something I earned with my effort, but those weren't your words, they were hers. They were the only thing she had time to give you, and he passed them to me because you remembered how much they meant to you. Izuku meets his gaze squarely, for all that his eyes still leak. Did you know she did the same for you? Midoriya, denial makes a strong shield, a rigid barrier between his heart and whatever pain lies beyond it. Already he feels a spiderweb of cracks. She says she's sorry for always teasing you about your hair, his student continues, ruthless even in his tears. She says she did it once when you were having a bad day, because she was trying to make you smile. But she cried instead, and you were worried she'd think you wouldn't deserve her power if you cried, and she never got around to apologizing for it. She's sorry she left you, and she's sorry she couldn't teach you more. She's sorry for so many things, but she's not sorry she picked you. She's never been sorry for that. The spreading cracks turn to crumbling. He tries to fight it, he really does, but he knows a student. He knows Midoriya Izuku, and Midoriya Izuku would not lie like this. Never like this. And she, his student's voice breaks. She says you visit her whenever things get bad, whenever it's so lonely that you don't know what else to do. You go to the place where they buried her whenever you feel lost, and you ask her a question. Do you want to know what the answer is? Toshinori stares at him, fighting a losing battle against the burn behind his eyes. She says it's every day, Izuku tells him. Every day, Toshi, every damn day of your life. It's Izuku's voice, but he can hear the words in hers, as clear as if she was standing in the room next to him. Toshinori can't see his student anymore. Everything is a watery haze. One hand pressed against his mouth isn't nearly enough to keep back the flood. She won't tell me what your question is, Izuku tells him. You don't have to, if you don't want to. It was Toshinori chokes on the words, on the memory, on the blood in his throat. I asked if. He moves his hand from his mouth, but he can barely speak even then. Izuku watches him, now calm and patient through the tears. Toshinori can only look helplessly at his student. Do I make her proud? Izuku purses his lips as if holding back a sob, but it does nothing for the flood of fresh tears. That's why she stayed, you know, he says, once he can pull his crumbling voice back together. She thinks you were the one thing she did right, and she can't stand the thought of leaving without you, and sometimes you're so bright she can't look away. His student is in his arms before Toshinori even realizes he's moved. Izuku gasps in shock as Toshinori pulls him into a tight hug, but it's only a moment before the boy's arms are around him. I'm sorry, Toshinori says hoarsely. I'm sorry, my boy, I'm so sorry. If he could take back his harsh words, pluck them out of the air and swallow them back down, he would. We don't want you blaming yourself for everything, Izuku says, his voice muffled against Toshinori's bony shoulder. We don't want you thinking everything you did was worthless, because it wasn't, it'll never be worthless. It meant everything, and you've done so much, and if I end up half the hero you are, then it'll be worth it. Toshinori manages a watery chuckle. He can barely speak, barely think. It's as if the world has opened into something so much bigger and stranger than he ever realized. But there's still one constant. One thing he's sure of. My boy, he whispers through tears. You're going to be 10 times the hero I ever was. Chapter 46. Inko wonders if this is going to be a regular event, having the retired symbol of peace in her kitchen for tea. She ought to have expected it sooner, given his arrangement with her son, but she's gone from months without so much as a whisper from him to a few scattered but important conversations. Now here he is again, standing awkwardly in her home in clothes that, for once, and too big for his new form, or his true form, rather. Inko wonders how open he's going to be about the fact that he's apparently been looking like this for the past 6 years. They sit down, and Inko pushes a cup of tea toward him. Is Izuku doing all right, she asks. Izuku calls regularly and insists that he is, but it never hurts to get a second opinion. Very well, All Might assures her. The class is away today. They'll be taking the provisional license exams. It's why I had the time to arrange this meeting with you. I see. Inko can't help the little stutter in her heartbeat, second-hand nervousness at this news of her son's b-day. All Might stumbles through a few false starts. We had a conversation, the two of us. A very enlightening conversation. I believe that, for once, we both have all our cards on the table. Inko nods. Izuku called her the night before, tearfully breathless in his relief, just to tell her the news. He told you, she says in a hushed voice. About his quirk. All Might nods. And? His eyes slide downward, as if ashamed of himself. It was a lot. I'm afraid that I didn't handle it very well at first. But luckily for both of us, Izuku is persistent. I was in denial at first. When he told me of his original quirk, he also told me about someone that I lost. He stops again and seems to correct himself. Someone that I thought I lost. He mentioned that you had a ghost of your own, she says softly, hoping that she isn't overstepping. My old mentor. My predecessor, in fact. I thought that I had come to terms with her death years ago. It's strange to think that she is still here. That she has always been here. It's a strange quirk, Inko says sympathetically. You learn to live with things like that after a while, but it'll always be just a little strange. She turns her head to the electric air freshener filling the room with the scent of spring orchids, and the next room where there's soft music playing even though she isn't in there listening. Marino likes the smell and Kurosawa likes the music. The mirror leans against the wall with a container of baby powder, just in case anyone feels like having a conversation. And on that note, I have a question, All Might says hesitantly. About something you told me earlier. Nervously he taps his index finger against the cup. When I met with you, you told me that dying would be the cruelest way to hurt him. And now that I know about his ability, I'm confused. His power being what it is, wouldn't he be able to see me in that case? Inko shuts her eyes, sighs, and wishes for patience with short-sighted, self-sacrificial falls. Yes. He would. He would see you and be reminded each time of what he's lost, because he will have lost you in a way. Just because he sees the dead doesn't mean he can't feel loss, All Might. It doesn't mean death doesn't cause him pain. She puts her cup down. When he first told me about you, the day you offered your power to him, I was hesitant. I could see so many ways that it could all go wrong, and I wanted him to be sure that he was making the right choice for himself. Do you want to know what he told me? The former hero nods wordlessly. He told me that he wanted, more than anything, the chance to save lives, and that your offer was the only chance he was ever going to get. He told me that he couldn't save lives with the quirk he already had. All he could do was talk to them when they were already dead. She hears All Might's breath hitch at that and thinks, good. It means her words are reaching him. My son has a strange relationship with death, All Might, she continues. I will never share that. Maybe no one will. But don't ever think that it means nothing to him at all. Don't make that mistake, for his sake and for yours. All Might nods, but she can see the familiar helplessness on his face of a man faced with something he cannot understand but desperately wants to. It's going to be all right, she tells him. It's strange now, but you'll learn. Izuku will explain things if you ask. It's not often that he gets to speak freely about it with someone who isn't me. I don't even know where to start, All Might admits. Her eyes soften as she looks at him. Start with Rei, she advises. Always start with her. He'll start talking and never want to stop. Izuku doesn't fall asleep on the way to the testing location. It's a close thing, but it helps that late summer days are hot enough to warrant air conditioning in the buses, turned up so high that his teeth chatter when he sits beneath the vent. When the bus finally comes to a halt outside their destination, it's a relief to step back out into the warm sun for all of 5 seconds before he starts sweating again. You look like someone just insulted your mother, Todoroki says dryly. Without answering, Izuku steps around to his right side and sighs with relief. Todoroki's quirk is like its own air conditioner even when it's not activated, and the oppressive heat keeps it from being excessively chilly like the air inside the bus. That bad? Todoroki sounds mildly amused. It's like an oven out here, Izuku mutters, letting his head fall to Todoroki's shoulder. The fabric of his school uniform is pleasantly cool. Don't fall asleep, Todoroki advises. Aizawa-sensei is saying something, addressing the class, and Izuku tunes in just enough to register that it's the normal gruff pep talk and general advice. There are students from other schools here, too. If you want to make an impression and yell plus ultra with everyone, you might want to stand up straight. Reluctantly, Izuku raises his head, but he stays close enough to Todoroki to take advantage of his right side. He cocks an eyebrow at his friend, trying not to smirk too hard. Since when do you care about making a good first impression? Todoroki blinks, and for a split second he looks almost defensive. What's that supposed to mean? Well, the first time you talked to me was when you walked up to me and offered me an ass-kicking, but... Todoroki makes a show of trying to shove him, but he doesn't try very hard. Enough. A smile is trying to take over, judging by the way his mouth twitches. Besides, I just said an impression. I never said anything about making it a good one. To be fair, they have drawn a lot of attention from the other examinees. Izuku's too distracted to notice them at first, but that quickly changes because the Shiketsu crowd is loud. Well, one of them is, at least. The rest of the class is pumping themselves up with a plus ultra call, and one of the Shiketsu boys joins in loud enough to drown them out by himself. Sorry, he yells, without lowering his volume at all. I heard what you guys were doing, and I got excited. I always kinda wanted to do that. It's a cool chant, you know. Really gets you pumped up. For a moment he glances in Izuku's general direction, and his eyes narrow, but it's over in a split second. Confused, Izuku glances around to see if someone else caught the boy's eye, but the only other person close by is Todoroki and Hina, but of course he wouldn't have been looking at him. It's only in looking around that Izuku notes the size of the crowd they've drawn. It's not just Shiketsu, but several schools. Some of them move in close to Gork, and Izuku finds himself shifting closer to Todoroki with vague discomfort at the unwelcome proximity. Others are standing back to watch from a distance, and the crowd is just thick enough to make it hard to see them all. Bakugo almost gets in a scuffle with someone from Ketsubatsu Academy before Kirishima calms him down. Eventually, a rattling hiss tells him that Rei's had quite enough of this. He's close enough to feel Todoroki shifting uncomfortably when she makes her displeasure known to everyone within range of the change in atmosphere. It takes a few moments, but people start to disperse. It's like the sports festival, but worse, Izuku mutters. Makes sense, Todoroki says calmly. There's a limit to how many can pass. Not everyone can make it, and not everyone at this location is a first year. He pauses. What's more, thanks to the sports festival, everyone here will know what our quirks are. We can't say the same for any of them. Okay, cool, Izuku says. I'm gonna go vomit. One of the lingering Shiketsu kids hears him, a pretty second-year girl with a school uniform cap perched on her head at a Johnny amble. She catches his eye and grins in a not unfriendly way. Brew, she says. That's like the eternal mood. Izuku waits until the Shiketsu students have returned to their own classmates before he speaks up. Their various classes are moving into the testing facility now, and Class 1A moves with them. Hey, did you know that guy? Which one? Todoroki asks. The one from Shiketsu. Tall, buzzed haircut, kinda loud. I could have sworn he was looking at you funny. I wasn't paying attention, Todoroki admits. You would have met him before. Aizawa-sensei says, falling in step beside them. I'm surprised you'd forget him. That was Irashianasa, he was a recommended student at UA. Todoroki pauses mid-step, then keeps walking. I thought he seemed familiar. He ought to have been. He had the highest score in the demonstrations. It was a bit of a surprise when he ended up enrolling at a different school. The highest score? Izuku echoes, glancing toward Todoroki again. As in, higher than yours. Higher than mine at half my power, Todoroki says. Izuku nods. Good point. It's kind of comforting to hear that, actually. Todoroki's far and away above where he was back then, and even during the sports festival. So is Izuku. So is everyone in their class. The other schools might have seen their quirks on display back then, but even now the sports festival feels like it happened a lifetime ago. Izuku glances around, eyeing the ghosts in his line of vision. Rei's here, he knows following Todoroki, Tensei wouldn't miss this for the world, and even Narita is flanking Aizawa-sensei. He didn't have them back at the sports festival. The ones he didn't use. Things are different now. He's learned a few tricks since then. Hoo boy, Kirishima remarks later as they get changed into their gear. Haven't seen that smile in way too long, Midoriya. The first test is instant pandemonium. In spite of Izuku's best efforts to keep the class together, Bakugo and Todoroki are often running on their own before it even starts, and Izuku has no time to try to convince at least Todoroki to come back before every single other school is charging them en masse. For a little while it works. It's not the first time they've fought together, and they can hold together as a unit even against the onslaught. But then the very ground beneath their feet heaves and shakes, scattering them from their hasty formation. When the shaking finally stops, the ground is ripped to shreds and Izuku finds himself alone, relatively. There are other students around, but everyone is scattered. The closest person he found before this point was Uraraka, and he can't see her anywhere now. He can't see any of his classmates within reach, only Rei hasn't lost track of him. And that's a problem, because they are surrounded by Katsubatsu students, and it's obvious that their teamwork is solid. Think this would have happened if UA didn't pit us against each other all the goddamn time. Izuku mutters to Rei. She blows a raspberry. Yeah, I think so too. Stay close, but keep an eye out for the others, all right. Rei nods, and her form flickers in and out of view as she flits about, but she stays close. Almost immediately she calls to him and points. There's Ida and Ayama dodging balls from a group of Katsubatsu kids. Izuku is about to go help when a familiar figure appears in his peripherals. There's Uraraka. She must have been thrown clear of the mob, but she's alone now, and if she's alone then she's vulnerable. Ida and Ayama have each other watching their backs for now, so Izuku hurries to join her. Uraraka, he calls as loudly as he dares, not wanting to draw too much attention to her. This is good. He's worked with Uraraka loads of times, and their quirks mesh together well. If they team up, they can take out 2 people each, easy. She turns to him and waves him over. Izuku picks up his pace, only to slam to a halt when Rei shoves him back with a warning shriek. He blinks, and there's a ball sailing at him, skimming past him from Uraraka's direction. If Rei hadn't stopped him, it would have hit him for sure. Uraraka, what? Izuku splutters, shocked. She wants to be a hero same as the rest of them, but he didn't think she'd pick a fight with him when they have other schools to worry about. Rei scoops up a piece of rubble and tosses it at her. The concrete chunk phases through Uraraka as if she's a mirage. An illusion. Find them, Rei, he murmurs. He has a ball in hand, ready to throw. Yell. Make sure I don't lose them. Rei vanishes and reappears somewhere behind the illusory Uraraka, screaming loudly enough for him to hear. Another ball comes at him, this one he catches and throws back. He's rewarded by a soft third and a high-pitched grunt, and the vision of Uraraka blurs and dissipates. It's the girl from before, the pretty Shiketsu student who grinned at him in the parking lot. She's in her hero costume now, looking sheepishly at the ball stuck to her torso. That's one, two more and she'll out, and Izuku will have one target left. Okay, she says. Gotta admit, that was pretty lit. And then she's gone again, out of his line of vision, using the rubble for cover. Izuku sees her form pop into view a few times, darting between hiding places, but he ignores them, Rei's not with them, so they are not the real thing. She gets smart after a while, as they pursue each other. Even with Rei giving her away, she's fast and clever enough to keep him guessing. He has a ball in his hand, ready to launch it, when he sees her zip out of hiding. He sees Rei on her, in his head he knows that's real, but his muscles second-guess him and hesitate all the same. He's on edge the next time she appears, and it makes him careless. He forgets to look for Rei, overcompensates to try and hit her. The ball sails toward her, and through her, another illusion. Rei's rattly voice rings out in warning, followed by a triumphant cry from the Shiketsu student. Yeet! A ball strikes him in the chest, locking in place on contact. The impact stings, but not as much as the frustration. Two more hits and his chance is gone. Rei saves him from another. She shrieks a warning when the girl gets behind him, and he spins and raises an arm instinctively. The ball is a split second away from hitting him when he catches it and launches it back. It catches her in a spot on her stomach, and the shocked retching noise she makes is almost comical. Dude. What the F? His chance is there, and Izuku throws caution to the wind and takes it. He holds the ball, but in his haste his balance is off, the move is obvious, and the girl has plenty of time to dodge. She almost spins out of the way with a warb-like cry of alarm. Rei snatches the ball out of the air and thrusts it into one of the target areas herself. For a moment, the girl stands in the rubble, gaping down at the three balls attached to her torso. A tinny voice rings out, announcing her loss and instructing her to make her way off the field. She looks up at him, lips pursed. Shock, disbelief, and disappointment flash across her face in an instant. Well, fuck me, I guess, she says. That was some next-level shit, though. Seriously wild. Sorry, Izuku says. If there were a way he could reach his goals without stepping on those of others, he would take it, but this is all that they have. It feels like making selfish decisions shouldn't be required on the path to becoming a hero. The other student seems to take it in stride, thankfully. Nah, it's cool. Good luck, my man. He turns away from her as she hurries to leave the chaos-ridden field. With a little luck, maybe he'll find the real Uraraka nearby. Shadow is the first in his class to leave the field with his place in the main exam secured. Months ago, back when his own advancement was his sole concern, this outcome would have left him either relieved or indifferent, but now he just feels restless. It's not that he thinks his classmates aren't capable. But the fact that his decision to strike out on his own worked out for him doesn't mean it worked out for everyone. And Midoriya's strategy had been a good one. There's no use pouting about it now. To compromise with himself, Shadow leaves the waiting area to wait by the entrance where passing students come in. He'll feel better once he sees his classmates come in successful. He feels eyes on the back of his head as he leaves, and turns his head just in time to see Arashi and Asa glaring at him for a split second before turning away. Eventually, his classmates do trickle in. They arrive not all at once, but in groups. None of the people he knows come in alone, and that bothers him a bit. When even Bakudo comes in scowling with Kaminari and Kirishima flanking him, Shadow starts to wonder if he didn't miscalculate on this after all. To his relief, Midoriya arrives not long after, though the darkening bruise on his cheekbone is a little alarming. He's chatting with Uraraka and Sira and looks up to wave at Shadow as they come in. Oh hey, you made it. Midoriya says brightly. I was a little worried about you, all by yourself. Shadow shrugs as he falls in step with him. He hasn't seen everyone from Class 1A yet, but enough of them to ease his own worries. It wasn't too bad. Why am I not surprised that you managed to get injured? Uraraka snorts and elbows him lightly. Would it surprise you that he managed to get injured after we were done? Of course he did, Shadow says in a long-suffering voice. A cluster of other passing students pass them on the left, and he hooks his arm around Midoriya's to draw him out of their way. To be fair, I'm about 70% sure it was an accident, Midoriya says. And they apologized. I wouldn't be that sure, Zero says. To Todoroki he explains, the guy he tagged out decked him on the way down. On the way down? The three of us teamed up to take the last four we needed to pass, Uraraka explains. Deku got them into our trap, and me and Zero sprung it. The suspense is killing me, Shadow says. Midoriya nudges closer like he's sharing a jerk. 2 words, he says, with a touch of sheepish satisfaction. People balloons. Shadow stifles a laugh, and it comes out as a snort instead. Not the most dignified noise, but it's quiet enough not to draw too much attention. Midoriya looks a little too pleased with himself. Once they reach the waiting room, Midoriya spots Kirishima and breaks off to go and congratulate him. Todoroki almost goes to join him, but he feels the hulking Shiketsu student eyeing him sullenly from another part of the room. I'm gonna go see who else is coming in, he says to Uraraka. Actually, that's a good idea, she says. Mind if I come with you? It looks like Tsuyu-chan isn't here yet. He nods and they make their way back down the hall. Wonder what that one guy's problem is with you, she remarks. HM. That kid from Shiketsu. Yuresha, I think. Did you go up against him in the first test? I never saw him, Shadow answers. Something tugs at the back of his mind, something important but uncomfortable, and he tries to turn the thought away. He's only just gotten himself to stop feeling dissatisfied. Uraraka shrugs and changes the subject, which he's grateful for. So not to get ahead of ourselves or anything, but what do you think comes after this? HM. When if we, I mean, 4 people with provisional licenses. Uraraka threads her fingers together. What happens after you get it? I mean, it's not a real license, more like a learner's permit, so will it change how we train, or what? Oh, we'll be able to take on internships, Shadow answers. Didn't we do that after the sports festival? Not exactly, Shadow says. We weren't official interns, we were just shadowing heroes in the field. As interns with provisional licenses would be given actual duties and responsibilities. The work experience week after the festival was education solely for our benefit. For interns, the expectation is that they offer something to the agencies that take them on in return for gaining experience in the field. Like being a temporary sidekick. Uraraka asks. Sort of, yeah. It's a chance to show one's abilities and make connections with established heroes. A lot of new pros start out as sidekicks at agencies where they interned. How do you even, oh right, your dad. Are you gonna intern with him after this? Does he even take on interns? Yes. A look of distaste crosses Shadow's face. He likes the free manpower. And it's a bit early to assume success, don't you think? Right, sorry. Didn't mean to jinx you. It's just hard to imagine you not passing, you know. Same with Decker. Her eyes light up. You guys should try and intern together. It's a nice thought, he'll admit. Just because we are friends doesn't mean we have to. Internships aren't meant to be fun, they mean to be educational. That's true, but you guys aren't just friends, you work really well together, too, Uraraka points out. And you spar all the time, so you know each other's fighting styles inside and out. I think it'd be nice to intern with a friend, you know. It's not just safe if you're with someone you already work well with, then you'll look better in front of the pros, right? That is an excellent point. Perhaps not everything useful has to be unpleasant. I never thought of it that way, he admits. It's worth thinking about. I'll talk to Midoriya about it after this. If we both pass. You'll pass, Uraraka tells him with a smile. Just play to your strengths and you'll be fine. Uraraka's a good friend. No wonder she and Midoriya get along so well. His mood is ruined anyway when someone shoulder checks him on the way past, almost knocking him into Uraraka. "Excuse me," Uraraka says pointedly, but the other girl simply tosses a glare over her shoulder at Shouder and keeps storming away. He recognizes her. She'd given him trouble out on the field. The 2 balls stuck to his chest were from her, but in the end his ice had kept her from getting close, and he'd gotten her out himself. Apparently Midoriya isn't the only who has to deal with sore losers. These UA kids aren't too bad, and NASA decides. All in all, a pretty hot-blooded crowd, and NASA likes to see that in people in general, but other hero students especially. The redhead with the hardening quirk is a guy after his own heart, and his grenade friend is a little scary looking, but NASA likes his style. Even the creepy green-haired kid is kind of cool, even if he's a little chilly for Anasa's taste. He almost talked Anasa's is clean off asking about his quirk, so maybe passion shows up in weird ways for some people. Of course, he seemed pretty friendly with that one, so obviously there's no accounting for taste. In any case, the main exam is almost starting. Most of the students that passed the first test have left a waiting room already, including most of the UA class. Anasa's sorry to see that Kami didn't make it. Better luck next time. He's about to go out himself when a familiar cold voice speaks from behind him. "Excuse me." Instantly his mood drops again. Part of him wants to ignore it and move on, but that wouldn't be right. It'd be cowardly, and worst of all, it would be cold. Anasa might not like the guy, but is not going to stoop to his level. So he turns around, looks down at Todoroki Shouder's frigid mismatched eyes, and restricts his scowl to a wrinkle of his nose. "Yeah? Did I do something to you?" Todoroki asks. "It seems like you have a problem with me." Anasa wants to laugh in his face. He doesn't remember, of course he doesn't remember. To be fair, it was tiny in hindsight. Less than a minute of interaction, only a handful of words passed between them. But it meant everything to Anasa, while it means nothing to the one standing in front of him. He knows for a fact that Endeavor wouldn't remember either. "You'd probably hear this a lot," he says. "But you really take after your dad, don't you?" Todoroki's eyes go even colder, and Anasa's gut twists with distaste. "It's the eyes," he says. "I've seen M on both of you, and they're the same." "My eyes." Todoroki's face is different, from bland, aloof curiosity to something twisting and cold and dark. His eyes flash with anger, and he pushes past Anasa and moves on to the next testing area. He brushes past by a girl from a different school, one of the students who didn't make it past round 1. She sidesteps to keep out of his way and shoots a positively venomous look at the back of his head. So, he hasn't changed much, apparently. And is out making more enemies, too. And no wonder, if he makes faces like that, heroes shouldn't look like that. They are supposed to be passionate, fiery, wholehearted in everything they do. Not cold and aloof like they think they're better than everyone. The girl keeps glaring at Todoroki, and that's a comfort. At least he's not the only one who sees it. The main exam is almost uncomfortably familiar. They step out into a war-torn cityscape, streets torn to shreds, buildings fallen down or in the process of falling, smoke darkening the sky. The sound of thunder fills the air, from crumbling architecture and localized explosions from ruptured gas lines and fires. The wreckage is strewn with victims, far more wounded and terrified civilians than Izuku can count. It's Kamino Ward all over again, and Izuku has the distinct impression that this was completely intentional on the part of the proctors. It's all simulated, of course. There are companies and businesses devoted to constructing disaster scenarios for the purpose of training nascent heroes. Every hapless victim before them is an actor, slathered in makeup and trained to play their part and evaluate the students responding to the artificial crisis. Izuku trades glances with his classmates and with any ghosts he knows among them. He tries to catch Todoroki's eye, but his friend seems focused elsewhere at the moment. He shifts close enough to nudge in. "Hey." Todoroki twitches. "What?" "That's odd." Izuku frowns, worried. "You okay?" His friend presses his lips together and nods. "It's nothing." One of the other students was giving him shit. Hino informs him helpfully. "That loud buzzcut kid you were talking about earlier. He's not a fan of Endeavor, which, you know, I get, but..." If you're having trouble with Yuresha, then try and avoid him, Izuku advises. This place is big enough that you can probably stay on opposite sides of the whole place without trying too hard, you know. Todoroki blinks at him, shocked, before it's replaced with comprehension. I'll keep that in mind, he says. Don't worry about me. Try not to run off on your own this time, Izuku advises. Something tells me that won't fly in this round. There's no time for further discussion. The exam proctor's voice drones out over the intercom, and the exam begins. Dozens of hero students descend upon the disaster below, and Izuku almost trips when he finds himself thrust into the middle of things. His footing and balance are fine, even on uneven terrain, but as he approaches the victims, he finds himself with a problem that is genuinely never encountered before. He tries to focus on the task ahead, but a wave of embarrassment threatens to trip him up. This isn't even real, it's play acting and make-believe, and he feels awkward pasting a look of concern on his face when he knows that these people aren't really injured, but he forces it down the same way he forces down fear. Luckily, swallowing embarrassment is much easier than swallowing a panic attack. He kneels by one of the victims, a boy who looks to be younger than him. Can you move? He asks, keeping his voice calm. And my leg. The boy offers an incredibly convincing whimper. I can't stand, please. I've got you, Izuku assures him, while the half-buried awkwardness makes him want to chew on his own tongue. Gingerly he maneuvers the boy into a firm, steady hold that keeps the designated wounded leg stable and turns in the direction of the designated safe zone. Around him, the other students are falling into their roles as well, tending to other victims. Bakuga's voice rings out from nearby as he chews out two who are uninjured enough to stand on their feet, and Izuku tries not to roll his eyes as they break character to scold him. That's probably going to lose him some points. It's almost comforting, knowing that Bakuga's struggling for once. He may be a strong fighter, but there's nothing to fight here, and he wouldn't know tact or bedside manner if they jumped up and bit him. He's still worried, of course. He hopes everyone makes it. He hopes Todoroki's okay. He hopes he doesn't screw things up too badly to pass. But he's in the right headspace now, and the task is clear. This is his next hurdle. All he has to do is get up and over. Katsuki sees as he frees a victim from a hefty pile of rubble, reducing the concrete trapping her leg to dust with a controlled blast. He lets Kirishima pick her up and carry her off to safety. Playing nice with civilians is his thing, not Katsuki's. Fucking hell, why did this shitty test have to be about rescue? He wants to fight, damn it. He pauses, surveying the area for somewhere else he can make himself useful, and jumps when he feels someone touch the back of his neck. It's light and brief, fingertips walking up the line of his spine, and it's gone before Katsuki has the chance to swat it away. He whirls, furious, and the only people in that direction are that loudmouthed bald kid from Shiketsu and some girl from some other school he doesn't know. The girl is closer, hands locked behind her back. Hey, he barks. Hands to your own fucking self. The girl rolls her eyes at him and hurries off, and Katsuki turns back to the test in front of him. Shadow couldn't have run off to operate on his own even if he'd wanted to. He'd be lying if he said it wasn't jarring to have to work alongside the same people he was just in a chaotic and pitched battle with not 20 minutes ago, but it is what it is. While Midoriya and most of his other classmates scatter to tend to victims, Shadow sets his sights on the crumbling buildings. He knows his strengths and weaknesses, and while his quirk is powerful and his technique is polished by a decade of grueling training, he's not good with people. He's not like Midoriya. He doesn't know how to talk, how to make people feel a certain way, how to make them trust and like him. But he knows now that his right side is perfect for rescue operations just like this, for shoring up falling structures just long enough to extract the people trapped inside. It helps that Yuresha has a powerful wind quirk and probably won't be anywhere near here. He passes by Uraraka where she's clearing rubble, and she gives him a determined and encouraging smile. He reaches the replica of a strip mall and finds one of the Ketsubutsu students struggling to keep it standing so that others can move in to retrieve victims within. He is a hardening quirk, not hardening himself like Kirishima, but hardening other things. But Shadow can tell that it only hardens, it doesn't fuse or repair. It keeps the building from crumbling further, but it doesn't stabilize. Move over, I've got this, he says, and when the other boy hesitantly steps out of his way, he puts his right hand to the damaged wall and reinforces the structure with ice. With his left, he sends warm air wafting in toward the victims inside. The others, including the one with the hardening quirk, move in to retrieve the victims inside. Shadow stays put to make sure his ice doesn't crack or impede anyone. His nervousness starts to recede. He can do this as long as he plays to his own strengths and keeps his quirk under control. There's no need to try to stand out in this exam. There's no earning points, they start with a set number and lose points for mistakes. As long as he doesn't screw anything up, he'll be fine. Throwing your weight around already, aren't you, Cheche? Shadow jumps, then turns to glare at Urasha. He didn't see or hear the other boy come up, but here he is now, eyes narrowed as he glares at Shadow. Your dad teach you to shove people around. Shadow fights to keep control of his quirk when it feels like his own body temperature is fluctuating, violating. My quirk was better suited for this, he says coldly, and grits his teeth to keep from saying anything more. Nobody else here is making excuses to show off, Urasha says. Guess I'm not surprised you're a glory hound born and raised. Maybe you should worry more about yourself, Shadow grits out. Shut him out. Focus. Your quirk's no good for areas with unstable standing structures. You'll be more use clearing rebel than bothering me. Urasha's eyes spark with sudden temper, and Shadow turns away. When he glances back, he's relieved to find Urasha gone. He shakes himself, trying to clear his head. If Urasha wants to waste time antagonizing him instead of participating, then that's his problem. For a split second, as he moves on to the next problem area, he considers going to find Midoriya, but no. No, he's fine. He and Midoriya might work well together, but it's better not to rely on him for every little thing. He can do this. Except Urasha will not go the fuck away. Shadow tries to shut him out. He really does. But every time he does anything, use his quirk, talk to someone, or just try to move from one problem area to the next, Urasha is there with a snide, catty cutting remark. What starts as an annoyance is quickly becoming a liability. Todoroki, over here. He almost sighs with relief when he hears Uraraka's voice. She waves him over to a mound of rubble, beneath which is sure more people are buried and in need of extraction. Shadow reaches her side, raising his eyebrows in an obvious question. There are at least 5 down below, she says. But it's not stable. If I lift the wrong piece, I might send the whole thing crashing in. Can you stabilize it with ice? No good, another student says. It might take time to get them all out. Hypothermia might. My left side controls heat, I'll handle it. Shadow cuts him off, already running ice and carefully controlled warm air through the rubble pile. He gets low, trying to reinforce it from the inside. What gives you the right to order them around? The voice is quiet but unmistakable, setting Shadow's teeth on edge. He tries to focus. Uraraka's already moving in, carefully floating the top layer of rubble away while he keeps the pile from collapsing in on itself. Careful, he says tersely, if only to drown it out. Sounds like someone thinks he's number one already just because his daddy coasted his way into the top spot. The timing is poor. Uraraka lays her hands on a load-bearing piece, and as it shifts upward, Shadow feels the rest of the pile shift in ways he doesn't like. Uraraka, Shadow yells to stop her, which makes her jump and float it further by accident. With a frustrated growl, Shadow sends more ice to plug the hole. It works, barely, and the other students have room to reach in and pull people out. Be more careful, he snaps, in full view of the other students and the evaluators and the faux victims, and regrets it instantly when he sees Uraraka cringe with embarrassment and apologize. Urasha shoots him a look as he carries a woman out from under the rubble, with a level of disgust that most people save for things that get stuck to the bottom of a dirty shoe. His parting shot rings in Shadow's ears, along with an evaluator scolding as Shadow and Uraraka both lose points. I hear our new number one treats other heroes like dirt, too. Guess you had to learn that somewhere. In any other situation, that might have escalated things fully. But before Shadow's pent-up anger has the chance to boil over, an explosion rings out over the testing ground. He recognizes the figures making their way into the field. It's the rank 10 hero gang Orca, at the head of what looks like dozens of armed sidekicks, or rather henchmen, in this situation. This isn't just a disaster response and rescue simulation, they're introducing a villain element into it, as well. Play to your strengths. Shadow lacks tact on the best of days, and rescue operations have never been his greatest strength, but this. Combat and battle tactics. This he can do. We are good here, Uraraka says. Your quirk's better for suppression anyway. Shadow needs no second urging. It turns out that Gang Orca is a lot bigger up close. He lives up to his code name. His heavy-duty mutation quirk makes him look like a humanoid killer whale, black and white with wild eyes and rows of wicked-looking teeth. Visually, he's well-suited for the part he's playing. He isn't the official third most villainous-looking hero for nothing. Every one of the foe villains is armed with a two-handed gun of some sort, and Shadow stops short as one of them takes aim and fires what looks like a massive dense sludge. A hasty wall of ice catches most of it, though some of it flecks harmlessly on Shadow's costume and hardens. Some kind of quick-drying cement. Harmless, but good for subduing an opponent. Already they are getting shots off, taking out other examinees rushing to stop them. Shadow spreads his ice wall, hoping to shield the other examinees from the projectiles, and sends ice rocketing toward the foe villains like a wide-ranging battering ram. Gang Orca punches through his defense with an ease that is almost insulting. With teeth, fists, and sheer brute strength, he leaves an opening wide enough for his men to pour through and engage. Right, he's a killer whale. Ice probably won't work on him. Shadow's left arm lights up red and orange, and he braces himself to block their advance with fire. Already throwing fire around. You look like Endeavor's second coming. It's the sports festival all over again. One moment Shadow has control over himself, ready to drive back the oncoming force with flying, and the next. Old shame rises within him, like bull welling up in the back of his throat. Disgust chokes off his fire, heedless of commands from his brain, and the flames peter off into a blast of hot but harmless air. A cement round narrowly misses his shoulder, driving him back as he turns to glare daggers into Yarashi and Asa's scornful face. There isn't time for this. The foe villains are pushing through toward the foe civilians, and he can't afford to lose focus like this. Does Yarashi want to fail? He sends another wall of ice up, just to buy time, just to get himself under control again. Can he even trust himself with fire, with Yarashi spewing poison in his ear? Can he afford to avoid using it when Gang Orca can punch through it like cheap glass? If you don't like how I do things, he grits out. Then go somewhere else. Yarashi takes down one of Orca's men easily, relieving him of his weapon. Damn, you're big-headed, he shoots back. What, do you think you can hold them back by yourself? When you're less than useless, yes. Shadow snaps. Gang Orca breaks through again, forcing him to retreat, and he readies his fire again. Don't act like you're better than everyone. Yarashi snarls. Not everybody can ride up the ranks on Daddy's dime. The fire goes wild again, and Shadow narrowly avoids taking a concrete round. Shut him out, he thinks, desperately, but it's impossible to shut him out when Yarashi won't shut up. You make me so sick, I could puke. You act like you're so dark and sad when really you can have anything you want. Yarashi wrinkles his nose as if he's smelling something awful. It's kind of revolting, seeing a spoiled brat like you get praised and worshipped by people who haven't even met you. Shut up. Shadow shouts back. Do you want to pass the stupid exam or not? Yarashi laughs in his face. Maybe I just want to make sure you fail. Ever think of that? What is wrong with you? Your stupid, arrogant face is wrong, Yarashi snarls. You think you deserve everything just cause mommy slept with the right guy. Shadow sees red. For a split second he forgets about the test, about Gang Orca, about his goals and desires and convictions. Just for a moment, all he wants to do is burn Yarashi's tongue to ash. But he holds back, somehow he holds back, because that's not the kind of person he is nor the kind of person he wants to be. I said shut up, he snarls back. My family has nothing to do with this. My father has nothing to do with this. Yarashi's eyes spark, and his mouth curves into a smirk. That's true. I guess he can't fix everything. Think they'll ask you to cover up that ugly scar for interviews. Shadow pours his anger into ice instead of fire, surrounding and encasing Gang Orca in a frozen prison. It's futile, the hero shatters it and sends ice shards flying. A jagged chunk hits Shadow in the face, gouging a deep scratch into his cheek. So how many toys did your daddy buy you to shut you up after he burned half your face off? You think a great hero like Endeavor would have been a little more thorough. Tears sting at the corners of Shado's eyes, blood runs down his face, and his flames run wildly out of control. As he fights to regain some semblance of control, he remembers belatedly that there are other students around, immobilized by cement rounds. One of them is well within range of his flames. Green light blurs in his peripherals as Midoriya appears in the blink of an eye, scooping up the unlucky student and carrying him away from the fire. Sakamoto Kuga, otherwise known as Gang Orca, is utterly mystified. This isn't the first time he's been called in to play the villain in license exams. He's seen fledgling heroes fail for a number of reasons: incompetence, inexperience, arrogance, and the like. But he's never seen anyone grind things to a halt to pick a fight with a fellow test taker. And yet, the two otherwise promising students before him are doing exactly that. He can't hear what's being said between the roar of Todoroki Shado's flames and the skirmish going on all around him. But it doesn't really matter what they're arguing about. Either way, their chances of passing at this point are slim to none. The flames swirl violently out of control once more, and Gang Orca tenses when he spots the cement-splattered boy on the ground in its path. But another student is already on it, so he focuses back on the boys in front of him. That mustn't happen again, no matter how seriously they said to take this simulation. With a sigh, he takes out Todoroki with a few well-placed cement rounds. He tries to do the same to the other boy, but he dodges out of the way with a speed that belies his size. Once he's out of the line of fire, he grabs one of the Orca's sidekicks as a shield and stays out. There are still flames emanating from the Todoroki boy's left side, so Kuga takes a step closer, ready to subdue him further if need be. The boy needs to be taught a lesson if he thinks he can be a proper hero with such paltry control over his own quirk. He doesn't see the third student coming until one of his men shouts a warning, and by then it's too late. The boy slams into him from behind in a blur of green lightning, hard enough to rock him forward a bit. He stays there, clinging to his dorsal fin, and Kuga readies himself to shake him off. A voice reaches his ear hole, just barely audible over the cacophony around them. Gang Orca. The student grunts with impact as a concrete round splatters over him from behind, but he doesn't let go. Don't react to what I'm saying. Pretend you're still trying to shake me off. This isn't about the test, and I swear I'm not lying. There's something you need to know. The bell rings barely a minute later, signaling the end of the exam, but Kuga hears all he needs. Shado's mood is low. It's with some difficulty that he scrapes the cement off his costume so that he can change back into his school uniform, but he does so with calm, almost mechanical movements. Some of his classmates talk to him, he thinks, but he hears none of them. Familiar faces pass him by, Urarakas and Bakugus and Kirishimas and many others, but Shadow keeps his head down and doesn't meet their eyes. He doesn't see Midoriya anywhere, which is awful because he really, really wants Midoriya right now. Maybe he should feel embarrassed about that, but he can save that for when he's feeling less wretched. There's some delay in presenting the scores, and still Midoriya is nowhere to be found when the screen lights up with the names of those who passed. Shadow doesn't want to look up, but he does, and he isn't surprised that his name isn't there. It ought to be a comfort that Bakudu's isn't either, but he can't even enjoy that when he feels so hollow. Slowly, he shifts away from his classmates. There are too many solemn looks, pitying looks, sympathetic looks, as if he deserves sympathy. Which he doesn't, not for failing this test, not after he let himself get goaded by another student and nearly injured someone by losing control of his own quirk. Midoriya would probably protest if he heard Shadow say that. Where is Midoriya? Under normal circumstances, Shadow might suspect him of having been injured, but Shadow saw him at the end of the test and he was fine. And now his name is on the screen, he should be here to celebrate, he should be basking in his success. If he hadn't shown up, things might have gotten even worse. He deserves this win, he should be here, so where? An unsettles across his shoulders, and Shadow feels relieved for all of 2 seconds before he recognizes the owner of the arm. It's not Midoriya. Yep. Yurasha pops the P and leans on Shadow's shoulders, as if they're friends, as if he didn't just spend the entire test making Shadow feel lower than dirt. Shadow's face tenses until he feels the scratch on his cheek reopen and sting. That's about what I expected. I didn't pass either, darn. I wonder why, Shadow says acidly. The words burn on his tongue, white hot with anger. Guess I deserve that. Yurasha says with a bit too much cheer for a powerful hero student who just failed an important exam. And I guess I owe you an apology, too. I really messed you up in there, didn't I? Shadow's fists clench until he's sure his nails are drawing blood. It's an apology. He should accept it graciously, however he might really feel. We both acted poorly, he grits out. Can't argue with that. Yurasha keeps leaning on him, and Shadow wonders how many people would notice if he shoved him off entirely. Sorry about what I said about your scar. Plenty of heroes still look cool with scars, I guess. Just make sure the cameras get your good side. Shadow is so close to doing or saying something he'll regret later. Yura. Hey, Todoroki. Relief washes over him when he hears Midoriya's voice at last. His friend is standing off to the side, straight-backed, holding a hand out to him. Midoriya. Congratulations on passing. Midoriya smiles brightly, teeth flashing white. Thanks. Hey, could you come with me for a sec? Aizawa-sensei wants to talk to you about something. Shadow's heart sinks with dread. Aizawa-sensei was watching the whole exam, of course. Of course he'll want to talk to him about that frankly embarrassing display. But the only thing worse than having to talk to his homeroom teacher right now would be staying here, letting Yurasha fucking Anasa invade his space for a second longer. He's about to step away when Yurasha's arm tightens around his shoulder, pulling him into something close to a one-armed hug. Sorry to keep him, Yurasha says. Hiya, Midoriya. Congratulations on passing the test. Midoriya offers a smile and nod. Thanks. Come on, Todoroki, Sensei looked kind of impatient. I'm coming. To Yurasha he offers a cool, excuse me, and extricates himself from under Yurasha's arm. He accidentally bumps the other boy's hand with his face, wincing when it brushes his still bleeding scratch. Midoriya waves to Yurasha, then takes hold of Shadow's arm and tows him back through the crowd of students. It's about that point that Shadow realizes something's wrong. For one thing, Midoriya's uniform is crooked and haphazard as if he changed in a hurry. Shadow knows he can't tie a tie to save his life, but he doesn't usually miss buttonholes like that. For another, he doesn't let go of Shadow even when he catches up, and his grip is tight, so tight it's almost painful. Shadow is easily keeping in step with him, but Midoriya's fingertips still dig into Shadow's forearm. Ow, Midoriya. Sorry. Just come on. Don't look back. What, you're not making any sense, what are we even? Midoriya meets his eyes, and the smile is still on his face, but it looks more fixed and less sincere. We are having a conversation. I'm saying something to make you feel better about the exam. Maybe you're laughing at something I said. Just come on, okay? Confused and now faintly alarmed, Shadow lets Midoriya squeeze bruises into his forearm as they make their way back inside to a spacious room behind closed double doors. Aizawa is there, but so is Gang Orca and the exam proctor Mera and several others. Aizawa is at his side in an instant. You all right? I've been better, Shadow says, still confused. I don't understand, I know I failed, but his voice trails off and he looks from Aizawa to Midoriya in the hopes of getting some kind of clue. As soon as he meets Midoriya's eyes again, his blood runs cold. The mask of calm is gone, and Shadow hasn't seen Midoriya look this haunted since the night he was rescued from Kamino. Shadow looks to Aizawa, swallowing his dread at his teacher's grim face. Sensei, what's going on? The doors open again, and a handful of Orca's men come rushing in, looking harried. It's no use, one of them says, voice low and apologetic. He vanished into the crowd once Todoroki left. We lost him. Another murmurs. Is this about Yurasha? Shadow asks. Did he say anything to you? Aizawa asks. Oh, he said plenty, Shadow blurts out, then shakes himself. But what about him? If there's a problem with him, then shouldn't you be talking to the teachers from Shiketsu? Aizawa's face darkens and Midoriya squeezes his arm again. That Midoriya's voice shakes. His face is drawn and pale, making the freckles stand out darker. Todoroki, that wasn't Yurasha. A change of clothes is retrieved, a pair of shoes slipped on and tied with hot pink laces. She trots into the shelter of an alley with a skip in her step and a hum at her lips, daydreaming of the next time she'll get to see Izuku. She wishes she could have talked to him. Given him her number, even. Well, a number. Oh, what if she'd gotten his? For now, she's satisfied with the vial of blood in her pocket. There's so much she can do with that. Chapter 47. Inasa's skull is pounding, but he tries not to let it show on his face. All things considered, he's in a pretty foul mood, at least by his own standards, but he tries not to let that show either. He remembers almost nothing useful, just the girl's face and the sting of a needle, before waking up draped over a toilet tank with one boot soaking in the bowl and a woman standing over him, dressed in the uniform of Gang Orca's agency and looking incredibly relieved to find him crammed into a bathroom stall. The indignity would be bad enough, but then he finds out that he's missed the main exam. The rest of the participants are outside receiving their scores, and Inasa has spent the entire thing drugged in a public bathroom. Then he finds out he's lucky to be alive, because his attacker was none other than Toda Himika of the League of Villains. She has the highest estimated body count of the League's current lineup, which means that the fact that he was found drugged instead of dead was, at best, statistically unlikely. But it's no use dwelling on what ifs. For now he finds himself bustled into a room where his homeroom teacher, the exam proctor, Gang Orca, and a handful of other concerned-looking adults are waiting with. Oh. Just his luck. He's disheveled, his foot and the edge of his cape are soaked in toilet water, he has a vicious headache, and is being pushed into a room with Todoroki Shouder and his green-haired friend with the creepy eyes. What are they doing here? It comes out more confused than angry. If he was attacked by a villain, he'd be debriefed, wouldn't he? Unless... Wait, did they get attacked too? Gang Orca nods. From what we can tell, it looks as if Todoroki Shouder was the main target of this attack. Toby used her quirk to copy a form in order to remain undetected. Shocked, Inasa shoots them another glance. Todoroki gives him a look that he can't read. His friend's face is bland and emotionless. Between the two of them, something curdles in Inasa's gut. The caustic mix of dread, anger, relief, and retroactive terror within him clashes with the bland calm he sees around him, and it sets his teeth on edge. Did you get a look at her? His own sensei rests a hand on his shoulder. Did she say anything to you? It's no good, Inasa says, shaking his head. I was heading now to the main exam, then she was there sticking a needle in me, and then the next second I was waking up. She didn't say anything. She didn't look anything like the pictures they have up, either. Must they taken someone else's form first, some girl from Katsubatsu? As he goes on to describe her in more detail, Todoroki stands up straighter. I saw her before, she tried to attack me in the first round, but I eliminated her before she could get close. Beside him, the other boy shifts from foot to foot and says nothing. Midoriya, one of the other adults, recognizable as the underground hero Razorhead, addresses Todoroki's classmate. The name tugs at Inasa's memory. He knows that name, doesn't he? Go wait out by the bus. You've done enough. Just a moment, Gang Orca speaks up. I'm curious. You did well, warning me while minimizing the risk of alerting the villain. She might have panicked otherwise. But how did you know? Are you familiar with Yuresha? Not really. Midoriya's voice is just as emotionless as the rest of him. We just met today. But I know Toda a little. When, he shoots a glance at Inasa. I was with the League for 3 days, and Toda doesn't care much about boundaries. You get to know her whether you want to or not. Inasa gapes at him. Midoriya Izuku, of course. That whole mess in Kamino was to save him and one of his classmates from the League. She's an actress, but... I noticed things when I came to help hold off Gang Orca, Midoriya goes on. The way she moved, the way she fought, the expression on her face. They were familiar. Really, uncomfortably familiar. And I heard some of the stuff she was saying to Todoroki, and that confirmed it. Such as? Razorhead prompts. Nothing that I care to repeat, Todoroki says icily. Attacks against my family, that sort of thing. She gets under your skin, Midoriya adds quietly. He leans over to bump Todoroki's shoulder gently. Like a tick. She's good at that. There's one more thing, Todoroki says. I believe Midoriya was also targeted, just more indirectly than I was. Midoriya looks up, like this is news to him too. When he came to bring me here, Toda stopped me from following right away. She held me back just long enough to greet him. She made a point of speaking with him. I don't know if she knew by then that he recognized her, but I'm pretty sure she wanted him to. I'm gonna sleep real good tonight, Midoriya remarks. There's a tired cough and Mera clears his throat to speak. If there's nothing more to be learned about the villain, then all that remains to discuss is the test itself. He nods to Midoriya. You already had a passing score to begin with. If anything, this incident confirms it. You have our thanks and congratulations. He looks to Todoroki. As for you, I'm afraid you'll have to attend the makeup exam in April for the failing students. Wait, what? Midoriya says sharply, eye snapping to Mera. It's the most emotion he's shown since Anasa walked in. Midoriya, Eraserhead warns. No, that's not fair, he protests. He was doing fine until she showed up. How can you fail him when she sabotaged him on purpose? Midoriya, it's fine, Todoroki says tersely. It's not fine. This isn't fair, I know for a fact you wouldn't have failed if she hadn't. I might as well have. Todoroki cuts him off. You weren't there, I was. It as good as failed. You didn't fail, you were attacked by villain. That just makes it worse, doesn't it? Todoroki interrupts him again, and Midoriya twitches at his harsh tone. Forget the simulation. A real villain showed up and I played right into her hands. Don't you get it? She found a weak spot and got into my head, and I made it easy for her. So drop it. The two of them glare at each other until Midoriya looks away first. I phrased that badly, Mera says mildly. Neither Todoroki nor Yuresha have officially failed the exam. But because you were both sabotaged, our results are either non-existent or unreliable, and therefore we must evaluate you both more accurately. I apologize for this, truly, and from what I've seen of your performances before this incident, I have every confidence that you both will pass in April. Remedial training will be required of you, but he nods at Todoroki. If you believe that some shortcoming of yours left you vulnerable, then you'll agree that that will be useful for you. Midoriya shoots Mera an icy glare until Todoroki elbows him. That's enough. Eraserhead speaks in a tone that discourages argument. There are a few things we need to discuss, but the three of you should return to your classmates. Todoroki doesn't wait for confirmation or for anyone to contradict Eraserhead before taking Midoriya's elbow and towing him out of the room. Yuresha bows, thanks them, and follows them out. The locker room is empty when Anasa goes to change back into his uniform. He leaves his costume with those of the rest of his classmates and fully intends to return to them as Eraserhead ordered. But then he steps out and hears voices coming from one of the side hallways that don't lead to anything important, where the students had no reason to go. He's alarmed at first, naturally, until he steps closer and recognizes Todoroki and Midoriya's voices. It's nothing more than curiosity that makes him creep closer to see neither of them needed to change like he did, so what reason would they have to delay obeying their own homeroom teacher? Anasa makes his way closer as stealthily as he can manage, muffling his own footsteps with soft cushions of air until he turns a corner and comes upon them. He's always thought he knew what to expect out of Todoroki Shouder, haughty looks and cold words, and much the same as what he sees in Todoroki Enja. And he hasn't known Midoriya long enough to expect anything at all. What he doesn't expect is to turn a corner and find them tucked away while the former talks the latter through a panic attack. Neither of them notice him, of course. Midoriya is too busy trembling violently while Todoroki holds onto him and talks in a low, steady voice. It's all right, Midoriya. Sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry. You don't have anything to be sorry for. I should have known she was here the whole time, and I should have seen it. I should have known the second I stepped off that bus. I know she was watching, I just know it. Midoriya. It's me. I never miss things. I'm not supposed to miss things, but I missed her. Midoriya. And she got close enough to as she could have, if she wanted to. I mean, she was already there when I got back to Yuan. Izuku. Breathe. Anasa catches sight of the look on Todoroki's face, and it's jarring. It looks nothing like it did all those months ago when Todoroki shut him down without even looking in his direction. Maybe if Todoroki's eyes had looked like this back then, Anasa wouldn't have come to the conclusions he did. I should have known, Midoriya repeats, but his voice has lost its frantic edge. I should have known, they've been so quiet since Kamino. That's not our job yet, Todoroki replies. Then, in a softer tone he adds, sorry I snapped at you before. I know you were trying to help. It wasn't your fault, Todoroki. Well, it wasn't yours either. Is your dad gonna do anything when he finds out? Todoroki freezes for a moment and something like fear flashes across his face just for an instant. No. Doubt it. Bastard's too busy with his new workload. I'll be fine, Midoriya. I'll retake it in April and I'll pass then. Don't worry about me, all right. I'll catch up soon. And as for Toda Himika, she didn't hurt me. She took your blood, Todoroki, you know what that means. And we all know about it. The heroes know about it. If she tries anything, then you'll be able to tell the difference, remember. A wet sniffle reaches Inasa's ears and Todoroki pulls his friend into a hug and lets him cry into his chest. Belatedly, Inasa realizes that he's overstayed his welcome. This is between them, it has nothing to do with him, and his presence is an intrusion. Still softening his footsteps, he hurries back out to the parking lot. His classmates are curious and relieved to see him, of course. Kama musses his hair, there's not much to work with, and calls him a scrub, and Mura-senpai gently nudges him for an explanation, but he shrugs and grins and fends off questions as best he can. Eventually they take the hint and leave him alone for now, and he sighs with relief. His headache is better than it was, but is not much for explaining himself at the moment. The dull throb is finally ebbing when he looks up to see Midoriya and Todoroki crossing the parking lot together. Midoriya is looking around and eventually catches Inasa's eye and turns to Todoroki. They exchange words for a moment before jogging over, Midoriya leading and Todoroki following. Inasa steps toward them, bracing himself. He's not sure what this is about, and is not sure if he likes or trusts these two, but it wouldn't hurt to give them the benefit of the doubt, would it? Yeah, he says. Okay, so Midoriya looks a little pale and red-eyed, but is noticeably less blank-faced than he was before. I know it's kind of awkward and you don't know us very well, but I guess we just wanted to know if you were okay. After everything. Oh. Inasa looks back and forth between the two of them. Midoriya seems sincere, if awkward, and Todoroki simply meets his gaze and holds it. I'm fine. Head hurts a bit, but it'll pass. Oh, good. Midoriya looks thoroughly relieved at this. It's weird, seeing him so expressive now after he looked so blank while talking to the adults. Beside him, Todoroki makes a noise of agreement and draws Inasa's attention again. Inasa's gut still curdles at the sight of him, but the feeling is duller now. It's hard to hate someone after you've seen them hold and comfort a crying friend. Before he can think of what to say, he finds himself presented with the top of Todoroki's head as the other boy dips in a short, sort of awkward burr. She was targeting me, Todoroki says, without quite meeting Inasa's eyes. Or both of us. Either way, you shouldn't have been involved, but you ended up getting caught up in it anyway. Sorry about that. Are you seriously apologizing to me for something a villain did? Inasa asks incredulously. Todoroki shrugs. You were collateral damage in an attack against me. Whatever problem there is between us, I certainly don't want you getting dragged into something awful because of me. You can accept it or not, but it didn't sit right with us not to at least say something. You really don't remember, do ya? Inasa says, and for a moment Todoroki seems to shrink in on himself. I take it you guys have met before. Midoriya says, glancing between them. It would have been at the demonstration, right? Todoroki says. For recommended students. You'll probably call it petty, Inasa says, crossing his arms. After I edged you out in our scores, I went up to you to introduce myself as a future classmate. You pushed past me and told me to stay out of your way. Even out of his own mouth it feels like such a small thing, and he shakes his head. Guess it probably sounds stupid. But it played out almost word for word like a run-in I had with Endeavor years ago. Brought up some bad memories, and the fact that both of you were considered top class by UA ended up souring me to the idea of attending. By now Todoroki is staring at him, wide-eyed with unmistakable recognition, and that's something, Inasa supposes. He had to jog his memory, but at least there was something in there to be jogged in the first place. Yeah, that is kind of petty, Midoriya says. Midoriya, Todoroki sighs. What? It is. I mean, shuffling past the fact that he judged an entire school on 2 people while ignoring the dozens of other UA-trained heroes who turned out fine, it's not like you told him you were gonna kick his ass on live TV. Midoriya. Or accused him of being an illegitimate child. Regardless, I'm sorry about that. Todoroki cuts him off, and Midoriya lets in. A few things have changed for me since then, and I'm sorry you had to meet me back then. I wasn't in a very good place at the time, and I shouldn't have taken it out on you. It's as sincere an apology as he could have hoped for, frankly, and Nasa hadn't expected one at all. Think I might have misjudged you, he admits. Voices call out from across the parking lot. The UA crowd is calling the 2 of them over. Looks like we are leaving, Midoriya says. Bye, Yurasha. Glad you're okay. Let's go, Todoroki. Coming. Guess I'll see you at remedial training, and Nasa says gruffly. Todoroki's mouth quirks to one side. It's almost a smile. The incident is dealt with delicately, but word spreads among the students anyway. Once they are back at the dorms, Aizawa-sensei gives them all a brief, stern lecture on the importance of discretion with ongoing investigations before releasing them. The moment they are all free, Izuku finds himself and Todoroki inundated with questions. It's Ida who saves them in the end, fending off nearly the entire class long enough for Izuku to get a word in so that they can properly explain things. Wait. Bakugo's eyes widen with furious realization. That bitch touched me. What? Kirishima looks alarmed. Someone touched the back of my neck in the second round. And when I turned around, all I saw was Baldy and some other girl. He cedes, scratching at his collarbone. It's the spot where Toga slashed him in Kamina. It didn't scar, but it was still the deepest wound he received that night. It's almost a relief to hear him yelling again, for all that it sets Izuku's teeth on edge. Bakugo has been eerily quiet since the results of the exams were released. He's the only one besides Todoroki who didn't pass, and his tense silence is far more unnerving than his usual volatile rage. Todoroki seems fine, for the most part. The temperature in the common room stays steady, and his usual calm facade doesn't seem to be a strain on him. He's quieter than usual, avoiding questions and letting Izuku do most of the talking. At some point Mika crawls into his lap, and from that moment on he ignores the rest of the class. It's getting on to early evening when the others finally disperse to talk amongst themselves, share the news of the exam results with family, or in Ida's case, go straight to bed in preparation for the start of the new term tomorrow. Todoroki dozes on the couch with Mika curled up on his stomach, and Izuku is about to join him when Hino sits down heavily next to him. It's sudden enough to startle Rei, who perches on the back of the couch and swats at his head. You know, Hino says. When I told you what I did at Kamina, I never said anything about you keeping it to yourself. Izuku looks at him, confused. Not about me, Hino says quickly. You can, You can do what you want with that. But, come on, kid. You've been quiet about Daddy. Have you even told anyone? Sent in a tip. Hino doesn't know sign language, so Izuku keeps his voice at his usual muttering volume. Straight to Tsukochi. Fat lot of good that'll do, Hino snorts. You know how many crackpot tips get called into the police these days? Loads. I used to do stupid shit like that in high school. No, tips aren't good enough. If you're worried about telling people about your power, All Might knows now, doesn't he? Izuku purses his lips. Todoroki said Toga brought up his family. Did she? Talk about how much he took after Daddy dearest. Yeah. Hino pulls a face. Clever little tart brought up my sister, too. She hit him right where it hurt. Do you think that may be Dabby? Hino frowns deeply, pursing his lips. Dan. I didn't think to ask the ghosts around her when they told me who she was. But, nah. For one thing, he wouldn't have had to. Yurasha, the real one, mind you, compared him to Endeavor before the second round started, and Shouder took it about as well as you'd expect. If she saw that, she could have built off of it. Is there another thing? Yeah. Hino frowns. She thought it was Endeavor who scarred him. His brothers didn't stick around long, but they didn't clear out till after my sister was hospitalized. For Yumin knew, and she wouldn't have fit, not even to protect them. She's not the bravest girl, but she's sensible and honest. Izuku's mouth twists. Okay. Okay, you're right. He looks at Todoroki, who still dozes fitfully on the other end of the couch. I think I'll tell him, at least. I don't think it should get out now. We just lost number one. Much as he deserves it, now's not the time to start discrediting the new one. Not until things are more stable. Hino sighs harshly. Fair enough, it's your world. I'm already dead, so what do I care? Please stop pretending to be an uncaring asshole, it doesn't work anymore. Eat me, Hino snorts, then adds, heads up. Izuku looks up to see Bakugo approaching and braces himself on instinct. He doesn't shake, he might have if Bakugo had taken him by surprise. But it's hard to get caught off guard when he's surrounded by invisible people willing to warn him about things. So he watches warily as Bakugo stalks toward him and past him, every inch of intense. Deco, he bites out. Meet me outside later. We need to talk. Without waiting for a reply, he keeps walking. Ray blows a raspberry that he doesn't hear. Charming, Hino says dryly. That's Bakugo, Izuku murmurs. He's always been like that. Ignore him, Ray says. He's stupid and he'll just hit you again. Izuku sighs deeply. She's probably right. Are you going to? Izuku jumps, Todoroki's eyes are shut, but apparently he's awake and aware. I thought you were asleep. He's loud. Todoroki opens his eyes halfway. Curfew soon. Think you'll be done in time? I don't think it'll matter to him, Izuku says. What do you think? Todoroki's mouth tightens a little, only for a moment. I try to avoid wandering outside after dark with someone I don't trust, he says. And you don't trust him? Not really, Izuku's voice trails off. In his mind, he goes back to the warehouse in Kamina, the taste of blood, the burn of his broken wrist, Bakugo's hand shaking against his shoulder as it heats up, and I don't fucking want to. I don't not trust him anymore. He swallows hard. Kamino changed things. How so? I don't know. Izuku's voice cracks. But things are different now, somehow, and I don't know if it's because of me or him or both of us, but his chest feels heavy. I think I have to. You don't have to if you don't want to. I can't just avoid him. You told me once that avoiding things that hurt you doesn't count as weakness, Todoroki says sharply. And it didn't change your mind, either, Izuku shoots back. Todoroki doesn't answer, except with a look of flat disapproval. It's almost identical to the looks on Hino and Rei's faces. If this is because of what I told you about what happened years ago, Izuku's throat closes up. I told you because for the first time in years it felt okay to talk about it. Not because I need protecting. He's bully, not a villain. I can handle him. Todoroki looks unconvinced, Rei even more so. Also, he said he wanted to talk. And Bakugo. I don't think he's ever said that to me before. So, that's something. Will it last? Todoroki asks dryly. Maybe not. But it's worth it to try. Todoroki holds his gaze a moment more, then shrugs and looks away. Try not to get dragged into a fight. You'd get suspended before the first day of the new term. With a sigh, Izuku gets up. If he just wants to pick a fight, then I'll leave. I'll see you later. For a moment it looks as if Todoroki wants to say more, but in the end he shrugs and lies back again. I'm keeping your cat. That's what I thought you were gonna say. He doesn't want to go, if he's being honest. He wants to go to bed, he wants to forget about everything that happened today, he wants to do anything but deal with Bakugo. But he also wants this dealt with. He wants things that he can't have, but that's nothing new. Bakugo is waiting for him just outside. It's not yet curfew, but it's close enough that Izuku knows they probably won't finish whatever this is before getting yelled at. He walks down the steps, hands clenched in his pockets, and watches Bakugo turn and walk away with a jerk of his head. Let's go. We can't talk out here. Izuku asks. Hands close around his wrist, and he looks back to see Rei clutching him, scowling darkly at Bakugo's back. Bakugo pauses. Fine, if you don't mind people hearing when we talk about your quirk. His eyes narrow. Or your quirks. Hearing those words is like being plunged into ice water. Numbly, Izuku follows him. They don't go far. But where they do go is a place with fewer cameras, fewer lights, fewer chances of being interrupted. Izuku's hands are clammy, his pulse pounds in his ears, and it takes a few tries to breathe normally again. He forces himself blank, like he always does. What's this about? Izuku's voice sounds hollow even to him. They're a safe distance from the dorms. No one's likely to overhear them, even if they yell. Across from him, Bakugo scowls, his hands deep in his pockets. So how many do you actually have? He asks, his tone grating. Ray pulls closer as Izuku answers. How many what? Don't play games with me, Bakugo grits out. I know you have more than one quirk. 2, at least. Would have thought it was fucking impossible, but then we met him. Izuku winces. Part of him wants to say it has nothing to do with All for One, but really, it has everything to do with him. He opens his mouth to reply, but his throat closes up and it feels as if his stomach is trying to crawl up his throat. He's not safe anymore. This isn't Todoroki or Uraraka or Ida or All Might. The last time he answered a question like this from Bakugo. Well? Bakugo snaps. Why do you think that? Izuku asks, voice shaking. Strength isn't enough for you. Do you think I'm stupid? Bakugo's voice rings out like a gunshot. You think I don't notice how fucking off you are all the time? He pauses, making a scolding noise in the back of his throat. They've got to be blind or deaf to miss so much, but I'm not. Everybody hears you mutter, everyone knows you don't shut up even if you're quiet about it, but they don't listen. They don't hear what you're actually saying. They don't hear you talk to people. Lots of people talk to themselves. I said don't play games. I don't know what you want from me. Izuku yells back, but that's not quite true. He does know what he wants, but even if there was something to tell, why would I tell you? Bakugo's palms spark, his quirk popping and flashing with temper, and Izuku recoils as if those firecracker bursts were aimed at him. Bakugo's hands curl into fists, cutting off the bursts, and he clenches his teeth in a grimace. What's the matter, Deku? Bakugo asks. Are you scared of me? He takes a step forward, and Ray moves in front of Izuku immediately. Think I'm a villain? Izuku freezes. W what? You think I don't see it? Bakugo barks out. You think I don't know what people say? I have eyes and ears and a fucking brain, Deku. I've heard what people say about you. I know something went down in Hosa. I saw you in the forest and I was fucking there at Kamino. Bakugo, what? You handled them? Bakugo yells, stepping forward. Every single fucking time I've seen you up against a villain, you've handled them. Useless, quirkless freak Deku goes up against every villain and fucking smiles at them. You went up against goddamn All for One and you fucking smiled. He stops, breath coming in and out in harsh, trembling gasps. Izuku stares at him, speechless, as his breathing starts to hitch. And all I have to do is grab you and you fold like wet fucking paper. You're afraid. Of me. Villains are nothing, but I'm the one that scares you. Can you blame me? Izuku blurts out. You've been treating me like dirt since daycare, and you're surprised that I flinch when you swing at me. Then what about that Toga bitch? What about All for One? What about Shigaraki fucking Tamura? Did you think they wouldn't kill you as long as you kept grinning like an idiot whenever they looked at you? They were nothing to you, but his voice cracks and he stops and presses his mouth shut, eyes widening. He's shaking from head to toe. They weren't nothing, Izuku tells him. I was always afraid, Bakugo, I'm always afraid. Bullshit, Bakugo spits. You handled them. But you don't handle me, and why the fuck? He stops again, decking his head, raking his fingers through his hair until they twist and tangle and yank. In spite of himself, Izuku finds himself stepping forward, past Ray. Bakugo. Bakugo explodes again without warning. What is the fucking problem? He almost roars. What am I doing wrong? For a moment, all Izuku can do is gape. What? I started the same as you. The same as everyone. I saw All Might, I saw how he fought, how he won, no matter what happened. I watched him fight, I watched him take down every villain he went up against, and I wanted that. I wanted to be him. He stopped for a moment, chest heaving. And you kept chasing that, no matter how fucking hopeless it was, no matter how much of a creepy, worthless freak you were, and suddenly it's like you were him. He plays favorites and picks you. Nobody else. Not me, not fucking Half-Face or Ponytail or anybody else. It's you. Everybody fucking worships the ground you walk on, and I'm. To Izuku's alarm, he sees the corners of Bakugo's eyes glisten. That shithead reporter called me a villain, fucking Aizawa said it too, and Aizawa didn't. Shut up, Decker. His voice cracks again, twice in a few words. Where the fuck did it come from? Why the fuck do you have two? Why is one of them is? Izuku flinches. I don't know what you're talking about. You're a liar, Bakugo snaps, and in that moment, so does Izuku. I know that, he shoots back. So out of everyone we know, why would I tell you? Bakugo recoils, eyes widening as if Izuku just took a swing at him. They narrow again, shining oddly in what little light there is. Fine, he growls. I don't need you to tell me, because I already know. All Might plays favorites, and he picked you. And all of a sudden you grow a fucking quirk, maybe two. And we just met that fucker in Kamino, who steals quirks, who knows All Might. He raises his head, red eyes blazing. It's his, isn't it? You have All Might's quirk. Not just a similar quirk, it's his. There's a leaden pit in Izuku's chest, weighing him down to the stomach. Bakugo's halfway there. If only he'd had an open mind when they were 7, he'd have the whole truth. Let's say you're right, he says shakily. What makes you think I would tell you the truth? The last time I tried to tell you a secret, you called me a liar and set your friends on me. Why should I think this would be any different? Bakugo stares at him. What fucking secret, he snaps. I remember you spouting some crock of shit when we were 8, but I didn't think anything about it because you disappeared right after. 7, Izuku says hollowly. We were 7, Bakugo. Who the hell cares? Suddenly he's shouting again, and Izuku is flinching back. You're not answering me. Why the fuck did you come out here if you weren't gonna? I don't know. His voice echoes, cutting off Bakugo's words. I don't know why I'm here. Izuku goes on, and the evening dark blurs around him with tears. I don't know what I thought, I don't know what I wanted, I don't know, he tries to breathe in, and his chest shakes and hitches, and the tears finally spill over. I wasn't going to come out here. They both told me not to come out. But I did anyway. Because I thought you were so calm before, Bakugo. And you talked to me, and you didn't yell, and you didn't threaten me, and I thought that maybe, after Kamino, maybe you just. Izuku stands there, hot tears dripping down his face as he tries to focus on the pale blur of Bakugo's face. He doesn't hear anything from him. He's as good as blind now, and what his former friend is feeling is anyone's guess. A small, cold hand slips into his, squeezing gently. You want to hear something pathetic? He doesn't wait for an answer. I used to have these daydreams, right? I still do, sometimes. I'd imagine that you'd come up to me. And for once you wouldn't hurt me or threaten me, and you'd say you were sorry. You'd say you wished you didn't do all those things, and you were sorry, and you know what's really pathetic about it? I think if you did that, if you said that, in real life, if you just looked me in the eye and said you were sorry and meant it, I think I'd forgive you. He chokes out a laugh. Stupid, right? I'm really stupid. I should have listened. I am sorry, but I'm so tired, Bakugo. I love helping people more than anything, but I don't know how to help you, and I'm just so tired. His body feels heavy, his throat raw. He feels wrung out from head to toe, like a damp washcloth, and right now Ray's hand is the only thing keeping him grounded. There's silence. And then, across from him, a similar broken laugh reaches him. Fuck. Bakugo's voice breaks again. How did the noise that he makes might be another laugh, but it's a broken, wretched sound devoid of anything remotely happy, so what would be the point of calling it that? How did I fuck up this bad? Izuku doesn't answer. My whole life, it's been about All Might, same as you. But I had a quirk, not you. I was gonna be great, I was great, everybody knew that and everybody said that, just like everybody knew you were useless and creepy. He forces out another bitter laugh, voice rising. And now you have All Might's quirk, and I'm the reason he can't be a fucking hero anymore. How fucked up is that? Izuku jerks his head up, startled. You're not. I'm not. Bakugo snarls. I saw you, Deku. You were, fuck, you had everything handled. You had plans and all I did was run. I was a distraction. Fucking dead weight. I had to get dragged out of that fucking hole while you were stringing those bastard villains along by the balls. Some part of Izuku wonders if he should feel pity. But right now all he feels is bitterness and old, scabbed over resentment. You know what your problem is, Bakugo, he says wearily. You always make everything about you. It happens quickly. Bakugo's what I spark, and then his palms spark, and he lunges in a flash of temper, the way he often does when he's backed into a corner. One for all comes to Izuku on its own as he flinches back, and Rei charges forward with a shriek and slams straight into Bakugo's chest. Izuku doesn't register it at first. He expects Rei to rush through him like she always does, so when Bakugo lands flat on his back with Rei perched on his chest and still screeching with rage, all he can do is blink in confusion. It's not until he sees Bakugo's eyes wide with shock and locked on Rei's hunched, snarling form that he realizes what's happening. Rei, no. Her fingers are growing long and sharp when he cries out. When she whips around to look at him, her black eyes ooze. Let him up, Rei. Don't hurt him. She hisses a protest and he shakes his head. Rei, please. We'll only get in more trouble. She hesitates and a familiar crackle draws his eyes to her arms, green lightning darts along her skin. Leave him be, he tries to say firmly, but his voice trembles. Let him up. Reluctantly she backs away from him, still hissing as she returns to Izuku's side. Bakugo scrambles to his feet, and it's not a fluke. It's not going away. His eyes are still fixed on Rei, wide with shock and alarm. Okay. This is happening. What was that about a crock of shit? Izuku asks. What the fuck is that? Bakugo hisses. Rei hisses back and sparks with grain. Izuku looks down at Rei, then back at Bakugo. The terror is back, cold crawling panic threatening to creep up his spine and outward. That's a ghost, Bakugo. He tries to take a breath, but it feels like he's breathing through a straw. She's a ghost. I see ghosts. Why, you were right, sort of. The lump in his throat breaks his voice to pieces, and no amount of swallowing will make it go away. I have two quirks, and one was given to me by All Might. But this one is mine. It's always been mine. Bakugo is silent for a long time. He stares at Rei until the grain sparks disappear, and then he blinks and flicks his gaze back to Izuku. Where'd it go? She's still there, Izuku says. You just can't see her. Bakugo's face twitches. Did All Might know about that before he gave you a second quirk? No, Izuku replies. So you lied to him too, then? Izuku tenses, bridling. I've told him the truth already. But you lied to him first. What of it? Izuku shoots back. And why wouldn't I, after what happened when I told you? At this, Bakugo blinks at him. His eyes cloud over with shock and confusion, and something in Izuku's chest, some squirming, twitching uncertainty, finally settles. Bakugo, he says cautiously. Do you even remember what happened when I told you? Bakugo blinks at him again, and part of Izuku is satisfied at how desperate he's starting to look. Do you even remember what I told you at all? It was. Bakugo's eyes flicker to Rei, or to him, the empty spot where Rei was previously standing, and back up to Izuku's face. It was back in second grade, right? Fuck, it was that fucking long ago, you can't expect me to just. Yes I can, Izuku cuts him off. Because I remember it. The closet is always with him, just out of his reach unless he's in the throes of panic. It's cloudy otherwise, all vague feelings and wispy, incomplete memories. I've tried to forget, Izuku continues. His eyes burn, but they are dry. He's run out of tears already. I try every day to forget. But I can't, because that day, it changed everything for me. It changed me, and because of that, I can't. I don't know how to not lie anymore. His throat bodds as he swallows. And that's why I'm afraid of you, Bakugo. That's why I don't see you the way you want to be seen. Because you want to be a hero, and yet you can hurt someone like that. Ray clutches his hand again. You can hurt them so bad that they still think about it and the scars still itch and it's shaped the person they are and not even remember. It was the worst day of my life, Bakugo. But it was just another Wednesday for you, wasn't it? Only silence meets this. It stretches long enough for Izuku to be sure that Bakugo won't answer, long enough for Ray's temper to call. For what it's worth, you're wrong, Izuku says. It wasn't you that caused All Might's end. If anything, it was me. Bakugo jerks his head up. He gave me his quirk. His power was already on the way out, and by Kamino he was running on fumes. You had nothing to do with it. When Bakugo speaks again, his voice is raspy and quiet. The hell I didn't. He's right, young Bakugo. You should listen to him. Bakugo's palms spark again, this time with alarm. It's only All Might and Nana, of course, striding down the walk to join them. It's well after dark, well after curfew, and Izuku ducks his head. All Might passes him, pausing with a gentle hand on his shoulder to check for injuries, and then moves on until he reaches Bakugo. Nana stays by Izuku's side, hovering over him and Ray in an almost protective manner. I didn't want to interrupt, he says with a sigh. It seemed important what you were talking about, and since it didn't quite come to blows, I didn't step in. But Midoriya is right. What happened at Kamino was not your fault. Bakugo's fists clench. I didn't even. What happened at Kamino was this, young Bakugo, All Might says. I did what I have always done. I did my job. Do you think a hero begrudges those that he saves for not rescuing themselves and saving him the trouble? Bakugo flinches. Needing rescue is not a weakness, All Might continues. It is not something to be ashamed of. How would heroes do what needs to be done if they resented and looked down upon those they should protect? You are not to blame for what happened to you, young Bakugo. Nor are you to blame for what happened to me. No one is to blame but the villains who have harmed us. Another flinch, this time when All Might reaches out and rests his hand on the back of Bakugo's head. You've made a great many mistakes, he says. Some can be fixed, some can be forgiven, but that isn't for you to decide. All you can do is learn and move forward and fix what you can. That's what everyone does when they make mistakes. That's what I try to do. Gently he draws Bakugo into the lightest hug possible, just one arm across his shoulders and no more. I'm sorry that I didn't realize you were struggling. Bakugo doesn't return it. He doesn't quite pull away, but he doesn't lean into it either. He stands stock still and ramrod straight, fists still clenched at his sides. This isn't, Bakugo's voice is rough and quiet. It wasn't supposed to be this way. All Might lets him go, and Bakugo steps back and out of his reach, still looking at the ground. Far too many things are out of our control. All you can do is decide what to do with what you can control. Your choices, your actions, your reasons. He pauses. I'm not blind. I know that so many heroes that came after me were chasing my image. But you can't just pick and choose what you like about being a hero and ignore the rest. You want to win, and that's good, but you can't forget why. We don't triumph for its own sake, we fight to win so that we can save people. It does a hero no good to only think of his own desires. And Midoriya was right, it isn't always about you. Izuku ducks his head. Why him? Bakugo's voice cracks. Why do you pick him? A few reasons, All Might answers. But at the end of the day, I chose him because I was afraid, and he gave me courage. Izuku's breath itches, but All Might doesn't seem to notice. And this can't get out. You know that, right? The power that I gave him has been a closely guarded secret for generations, and the world is, well, it's about to get more dangerous. Do you understand, young Bakugo? Bakugo nods. Good. In any case, it's well after curfew, All Might continues. The first day of the new term is tomorrow. Come back to the dorms now. Aizawa wants a word with you before you go to bed. The walk back is quiet. Nana's hand rests on Izuku's shoulder, Ray's curls into one of his, and All Might falls into step beside him. All right, he asks, and his eyes hold far more concern and pride and an unspoken apology. I'm fine, Izuku murmurs back. All the while, Bakugo says nothing. Sure enough, Aizawa-sensei is waiting for them when they return. He doesn't quite look angry, but he does look thoroughly unimpressed. I'm sure you both had an excellent reason for wandering around nearly a half hour past curfew, he says flatly. And I'd love to hear it. Izuku shuts his eyes and braces himself for a punishment. We were. It was my idea, Bakugo bites out. Izuku has to make an effort not to gape at him. We were having a conversation, he says. A conversation? Aizawa has the look of a man with a 7-hour-long migraine. And is there a reason why this conversation couldn't have taken place inside? Or tomorrow? It got sort of personal, Izuku answers. And loud. If I may, Aizawa, All Might breaks in, a little meekly. I know that rules are in place for a reason, but at the same time, the discussion did turn to things that I would rather not have been overheard. So, I'm a bit grateful they didn't hold this shouting match in the common room. Or in either of their rooms. Fen Walls, you understand. Aizawa gives him a withering look. Of course, he says acidly, and sighs again. Obviously, breaking curfew and the 4 school regulations has consequences, you've been told this. Both of you will report back here immediately after orientation tomorrow. You'll be spending your free hours tomorrow cleaning the common area from top to bottom. If you're quick, this won't stretch over multiple days and cut into your homework time. Understand? They nod. Good. Go to bed. Izuku suppresses a sigh of relief. It's a slap on the wrist, hardly even an official punishment. It could have been much worse. Maybe if it had come to a fight, it would have been. Bakugo goes to the elevator, and Izuku keeps walking toward the stairwell. Deku. Izuku looks back. Bakugo's eyes are fixed on the elevator door as he waits for it to come down. It was an empty closet that we couldn't even lock. The door's open, but he doesn't walk in right away. It wasn't supposed to. Good night, Bakugo, Izuku says. I hope you find what you're looking for. Todoroki is still awake after Izuku is finished getting ready for bed. His room is dark when Izuku taps on his door and opens it, but when he looks at his friend, he finds Todoroki watching him as if he's been waiting for him. How'd it go? Todoroki asks when Izuku settles down next to him. I don't know. Do you want to talk about it? Not really. Izuku shuts his eyes. There are paws walking along his leg. Todoroki must have brought Mika into his own room. What about you? Are you okay after today? Todoroki is silent for a while. No, he whispers hoarsely. Today made me realize that, no. I'm not. There are things I thought I'd gotten over that I haven't. You could have ended up a lot worse, Izuku points out. He's surprised when Todoroki shifts closer and wraps an arm around him. Todoroki usually isn't the one that initiates clinging. Yeah, he says hoarsely. No. Thanks, Midoriya. You called me Izuku earlier. Sorry. It's fine, Izuku says. Anybody who takes me at my word that ghosts are real gets to call me Izuku. Todoroki doesn't say much of anything after that, so Izuku huddles closer and tries to shut his mind off from all thoughts of Toda Himiko and Bakugo Katsuki. That was lenient of you, All Might remarks. Was it? Shouder asks, dreading the oncoming headache. Green tea is lovely, but it can't work miracles. A bit. The former symbol of peace shrugs. Considering your track record of expulsions. Shouder snorts into his tea. You joking, right? Bakugo just resolved a dispute with verbal communication. I'm half tempted to give him extra credit. Chapter 48. Shouder awakens to a gentle shaking and a quiet but insistent, Todoroki, hey, Todoroki, wake up. Grumbling, he drags his eyelids open and glares half-heartedly at Midoriya, at Izuku, whatever, either one, for all the good it does. His friend's eyes are a little shadowed, as they always are, but nonetheless wide awake and bright. As Shouder's vision focuses, he sees that Midoriya is in fresh clothes already. He must have gone back to his own room at some point, so he's been up for a little while at least. "What time is it?" he asks, still squinting through cleaning sleep. "Why are you already up?" "It's 5 minutes before you would have woken up anyway," Midoriya assures him. "Listen, there was something happened last night, and I wanted to look into it, just to try out a few things, experiment a bit, just make sure it wasn't a fluke or anything, and it totally wasn't. At least I'm pretty sure it wasn't. In fact, I could really use your help confirming, which is why I'm waking you up instead of." Shouder heaves a sigh and sits up, still trying to massage his eyelids open. What do you want from me?" "I just need your input on something." "On what?" Izuku points to the other side of the futon. "Can you see her?" Still groggy, Shouder turns to follow the direction of the finger. A moment later he's wide awake, fully out from under the comforter and scrambling back with a muffled yelp. He grabs onto Midoriya's sleeve, which steadies him enough to keep him from falling on his ass. A little girl stands there, barefoot in a long white shirt that reaches halfway between her knees and ankles. It's either a nightshirt or a hospital gown, but either way it doesn't matter much when her eyes are empty black pits, her skin is quartz white and sparkling with green, and her hair is moving on its own. "It's okay." Izuku shouts in his ear before he can properly panic. "It's okay. I was just checking. Meet Ray." "Ray, you know Todoroki already." It's then that Shouder registers the sound of static, short staccato bursts of crackling hisses. The sound is coming from the girl's mouth, open and turned up at the corners. She's laughing at him. "Ray, please be nice," Izuku says. "Sorry about that. I wasn't sure you'd see her." "Oh, I see her," Shouder says faintly. Why is that?" "I'm kind of working out the details myself," Midoriya admits. "I just figured out I could do that last night, and I'm not exactly sure how or why. It's temporary, though." "Oh, is all Shouder can manage." He hasn't been in the business of watching movies lately, but the girl, Ray, looks like she crawled out of a horror film, aside from your sparks. "What?" "She's got your sparks," Shouder says and points. The girl's form crackles faintly with traces of green, not unlike the green lightning that takes over when Midoriya uses his quirk. Or one of his quirks. Is this the same quirk that gives him strength? If a ghost and Ray is definitely a ghost, can't be anything else, has it? Then that's definitely a connection. He'll have to ask later. "Yeah," Midoriya says. She, usually doesn't." How long has she been?" "About 8 minutes. Abruptly he claps Shouder's shoulder. "Well, anyway, thanks for your input. Gotta go, good morning, see you downstairs at breakfast." "Ray, stay in here until it wears off, okay?" She garbles something in reply, signs an okay, and with that Izuku is out the door. Awkwardly Shouder sits on his bedroom floor and watches a dead little girl wander around exploring his room. He doesn't get up to start getting dressed until she fades from view. He only hopes that means she's gone. As always, Tenya is ready for class well before anyone else. His uniform is crisp, he's had his breakfast and his morning run and shower, and is ready to take on the day. When he steps out of his dorm room, Midoriya pushes him back in and closes the door. "I have a really weird, really forward question, please don't punch me." "Okay." Tenya blinks several times, bewildered. Midoriya looks as tired as ever, and everything about him is in a bit of a disarray, though not in a bad way, Tenya notes. He doesn't look troubled. He looks excited. "I mean, of course I would never strike you. Not without due cause, of course, and believe me, that would have to be quite an outlandish situation to drive me to use violence against you, so I doubt a mere question would. Do you want to see your brother?" Tenya's words sputter to a halt. "I mean, do you want to talk to him? For real, face to face?" Midoriya shifts from foot to foot, as if burning off excess energy. "I know this is, abrupt. I've thought about it and I couldn't think of a gentle way to ask this. I figured out something with my power and I was just wondering if you..." "Yes," Tenya blurts out. Yes, yes. Midoriya's face breaks into a relieved smile. Okay. Hey, this lasts about 10 minutes. And he'll disappear again, but just to you. He'll still be there. It's still early, and I know you like to get to class early, but... Midoriya. Tenya's voice cracks. Say, if you're going to come to me and say something like that, then... Right. Okay. Midoriya activates his power, that technique he calls full cowl. He reaches out to Stair and there he is. He looks pale. Startled. Green lightning darts along his skin, as if Midoriya has somehow transferred his power to him. Perhaps that is how it works. Energy that Midoriya can use himself or pass along to the dead. When Tensei meets his eyes, for the first time since the morning he left on patrol and never came back, Tenya's throat closes. His brother's eyes are empty white sockets, as wide and startled and disbelieving as Tenya knows his must be. Midoriya leaves the room at some point, but Tenya barely notices beyond registering a whisper of 10 minutes. Hi, Tenya. His brother's voice wavers. Long time no see. It's the first time he ever walks into class with the bell. A text from Yomizuku brings Toshinori to the empty meeting room where they usually have discussions that aren't meant to be overheard. His successor is waiting for him by the door, looking fidgety and restless for good reason. Can this wait, my boy? Toshinori asks. If you aren't careful, you'll miss the start of term assembly. No. Don't worry, I'll be quick. Izuku follows him into the room and stands there, bouncing on the balls of his feet until the door is shut. Ms. Nana wants to talk to you. Toshinori freezes, still holding the doorknob. I don't know how much you saw last night, Izuku goes on. But before you interrupted, it almost became a fight, but one of my ghosts stopped it. She stopped Bakudo before he had the chance to lose his temper and throw a punch. I saw, Toshinori says. I think yes. I saw her. It was hard to miss at the time. It's not every day one sees a little girl step out of thin air and knock Bakudo Katsuki flat. That was she. She was very young, wasn't she? I did something, Izuku says. To make her appear like that, visible and solid. I'm still working out the details of how, but anyway, Ms. Nana came to me this morning and asked me if I could do it for her, because she wants to talk to you. He pauses, glancing up at Toshinori with a cautious look on his face. Is that okay? He must look a fool, staring at his student as if the boy is speaking Welsh, but Toshinori finds himself at an utter loss for words. It's fine if you aren't, Izuku tells him, and then frowns and sidesteps. Yes, it is. If it's too much, then I understand. He sidesteps again. It's completely up to you, knock it off, Ms. Nana. It's not like she can do anything unless I help her. He swats something by his ear as if shooing off a bothersome fly or an invisible hand. Anyway, it's your choice. Yes, Toshinori blurts out. Why yes? Please. It's fine with me. I would like to talk to her. A lump gathers in his throat, heavy and aching. Izuku lowers his hand to his side, and his eyes soften. We were hoping you'd say that, he says, and activates one for all. Toshinori blinks, and she's there when he opens his eyes. She isn't dressed for hero work. She looks the way she did before she passed her quirk to him, hair pulled up, in comfortable clothes for training. It's as if she stepped right out of one of his own memories. She's pale, but not translucent or wisp-like. She doesn't look like a ghost or a mirage. She looks like a person, solid enough to touch. It's then that Toshinori realizes he's lifted his hand to reach out to her. Mortified, he pulls back and wrings his hand at his side. Hello, sensei, he says. Her arms are around him before he can blink again, crushing and cold, and she's solid enough to drive him back a few steps. I'm gonna go, you have about 10 minutes, Izuku says, somewhere in the background. Toshinori barely even hears him exit. There are a lot of things I want to say, Shimon Nana tells him, her voice muffled from crushing him in a hug. That's all it takes to break him. It's her voice. He hasn't heard it since he was a child, a lifetime ago, and he'd forgotten the sound of her voice. But now here it is, the familiar pitch and timbre in his ears, as familiar to him as if she's only been gone a day. Toshi, hey. It's all right. She pulls back, or tries, because Toshinori can't let go just yet, so she sighs fondly and ruffles his hair. It's almost like it used to be, except now she has to reach up to do it. Look at you, you're not allowed to give your boy a hard time for turning on the woodworks anymore, got it? Toshinori laughs, a watery crackling thing, and finally lets her go. I'll try. I know you will. When his eyes are clear again, she's grinning up at him with her hands on her hips. Well, look at you, Stretch. If I'd known that mop-headed little scrap of nothing I tricked over decades back would end up towering over me, I wouldn't have teased so much. You wouldn't have believed me if I tried to warn you, Toshinori says. Guess not. Her cheeky smile softens to something fond. Hey. I know the little been told you already, but... I'm sorry. No, she holds up her hand as Toshinori starts to protest. I know what you're going to say. But the fact of the matter is I wasn't there. I didn't get to teach you. I didn't get to watch you, to stand by you as you grow. At least, not in a way that was helpful. You gave me strength, Toshinori says softly. Even after. You would have found that strength whether I was with you in spirit or not at all, she says. And whether or not it was my fault, I couldn't be with you alive. I wish I was, and I'm sorry I wasn't. Toshinori nods, unable to find any more words. And that's what I wanted to talk to you about, she goes on, stepping back further. I hate to sour things. Maybe it'd be better to save this for next time, but it's important. I've put off a lot of things, Toshi, and it's almost made trouble. I dawdled over helping your boy learn to fight until he almost died at the USJ, and I dawdled over telling him the truth of who I was until that night in Hosa. I won't make that mistake a third time, Toshi. She hesitates. I won't let you make that mistake. What do you mean? Toshinori fights to keep his voice steady. She's been with him this whole time, he knows. And that means she was there when. She watches him with sad eyes, or she would if her eyes were visible. Toshi, she says, gently chiding. You haven't told him about what night I said. He coughs a bit, tasting liquid iron as it crawls up from his throat. I know, he rasps. No, I haven't. He looks to the door, firmly shut ever since Izuku left. And I don't know if I can. You can, Nana informs him patiently. And you will. He's opened up to you about as much as he possibly can. He's told you his deep dark secret. Don't you think you owe him the same? Were you there when I spoke with his mother? Toshinori asks. When she told me that the worst way I could hurt him was... Nana arches an eyebrow at him. And you think it would hurt him less by coming out of nowhere? It's going to hurt him either way. Toshinori shakes his head. If I tell him, then he'll only dread it. Isn't it better for him to be content leading up to it? You're thinking short-term, Toshi, she says, shaking her head in disapproval. It'll come out eventually, and do you think he'll take it well, knowing that you knew about it and kept it from him? I'm not sure there's any point in telling him now, Toshinori says quietly. Oh? Why is that? His throat closes up, and he grits his teeth until he can speak again. There was a moment in Kamino. I thought that was my time. I was sure that was it. But I'm still here. And I know that I'm not past the time frame, but I was so sure. And part of me wonders, did I miss it? It shouldn't be possible, but I can hope. For the first time in 6 years I feel like I can hope, and I don't want to give him that same hope if it's just going to be taken away. He hears Nana's small ha. Guess we are on the same page, then. What? Look, I understand your reasons. I understand that you're scared, I understand why you're scared. Like I said, I've kept things from him, too, and I've seen the fallout. You weren't there when he tore into me for not telling him who I was to you and how I died, after he learned it from Gran. She crosses her arms, still crackling faintly with one for all, a sputtering candlelight to the beacon it once was in her. Do you know why I didn't tell him about it myself, after that little conversation? Because you assumed that I had my own reasons. Nana gazed impatiently. If he could see her eyes, he's sure she would be rolling them. Honestly. It's because I took it with a grain of salt. Night I said. I know what night I said. And I agree with him, it was definitely a possibility, especially with how you were back then. He's never been wrong, Toshinori reminds her. The futures that he sees can't be avoided. It's supposed to be impossible, says the quirkless symbol of peace, talking to a dead woman. Toshinori stares at her. We are two impossible people, Toshinori. The third just stepped out for a school assembly. She steps forward, arms still crossed. I made up my mind to tell him after Kamina, once he had healed body and mind. Then he confided in you and made it possible for us to have this talk. And I'm telling you, right now, if you don't tell him, then I will. He sees her point. He understands what she's saying, agrees with her even, but... He told you his darkest secret, Nana says. He was scared, but he did it anyway. You're scared, I know that. I understand. But I know you're brave, too. You can do this, Toshinori. You can take it, and so can he. And maybe, just maybe, 3 heads will be better than 1. Maybe we can beat this. He's silent for a while, mulling over her words, searching for a chink in the defenses and finding none. And if we can't, he asks. If it's all for nothing. What's the alternative? Lie down and die. She clucks her tongue again. You going to fight for that boy, and he's going to fight for you, too. And now that he's here, I'm not as useless as I used to be, which means that I can help, too. Since when have any of us ever fought for nothing? The smile spreads across his face, unbidden as his eyes sting with tears. Why do you always make so much sense? I am a grandmother, let me remind you, she says with mock hardness. He laughs, face crumpling in merriment until his eyes shut tight against the tears. When he opens them again, she's gone. She must be cursing something awful, being cut off like that. All right, he says. All right. I'll tell Hen. Let's see if we can't fix this. The start of term assembly is over fairly quickly. Principal Netsu gives them a general introduction and rundown that Izuku dozes through. The one point that catches his attention is a stray mention of internships. Todoroki had mentioned those, hadn't he? Uraraka was coaxing answers out of him on the bus ride back from the exams, and Izuku is intrigued enough to wonder. Aizawa-sensei goes into more detail during class and leaves Izuku with a lot to think about. Gran Torino is the one connection he has from the sports festival and field training, but is not a very active hero. He'll probably have to look elsewhere. For now, though, he has duties to attend to. As soon as they are free for the day, he and Bakugo move in on the common area and start cleaning. The rest of the class is a little bewildered, though once Ida knows what's going on, he's very helpful in keeping the others from getting underfoot. No one gives him any trouble or, as Izuku feared, makes messes on purpose just to give him more work. He and Bakugo avoid each other. There's plenty to do, so it's easy to stay out of one another's way. While Izuku runs a vacuum over the carpets, Bakugo cleans the kitchen counter. Izuku scrubs the sinks, Bakugo dust mops the carpetless floors. Izuku sweeps out the laundry room, Bakugo shouts the others into bringing their trash together. And while Bakugo dusts, Izuku takes the cumbersome bags and hauls them to the dumpster outside. They are almost done by now, which is a relief. It would have sucked to have to do this after class has started. Unfortunately, he's not quite used to this path just yet, especially when half his attention is on balancing the bags in his arms. He ends up turned around, and after a moment or two of backtracking he pauses by the wall of a building to try and get his bearings. The dumpsters are down that way, someone says out of nowhere, and Izuku turns to find a face watching him from the nearest wall. It's not someone leaning against the wall, there's a face literally on the wall, protruding from it and watching him with strange dark eyes. He doesn't even register the words, because there is a face sticking out of the goddamn wall and it's talking to him. With a shriek, he swings the heavy trash bags right into the face, barely noticing the split-second alarm on the face before it hits. The force of the blow splits the largest bag down the middle, spilling half its contents onto the ground. He doesn't care much about that, not with Ray hissing static-filled threats nearby, and his heart pounding so hard he can feel it in his teeth. But when he looks at the wall again, the face is gone. His guard is still up, and so is Ray's, so he hears Aizawa-sensei coming before his teacher reaches his side. What's going on, Midoriya? There was a face on the wall, he blurts out. I didn't. It wasn't someone I recognized, but I swear there was a face on the wall, right there, just a few seconds ago, and he pauses. How do you get here so fast? You were taking a while, so I came to make sure you hadn't gotten lost. You said a face. I am so sorry. The voice comes again, and Izuku jumps. The face doesn't reappear on the wall, thankfully. This time it comes running out with the rest of its body attached. Izuku gives a shaky sigh of relief when he sees him. It's not an attacker or an infiltrating villain, it's only another student. He's got about 15 centimeters on Izuku, blonde-haired and broad-shouldered and clearly a year or two ahead of him. There's something familiar about him in that vague and distant way that tells Izuku he's probably seen him somewhere but never met him in person. Tagada-kun, Aizawa-sensei says mildly. Is there a particular reason why you're hanging around halfway between the dumpsters and the first-year dormitories? I'm sure a top third-year student has better things to do with his time than frightening the underclassmen. I actually wasn't frightened, Izuku starts to say, but is interrupted when Tagada bends at the waist in a bow. I apologize, sensei. Tagada says, straightening again. And to you too, Midoriya, at you. I'm so sorry for startling you. I was walking the grounds and I noticed that you looked a bit lost, so I thought I'd point you in the right direction. My classmates are used to me showing up like that, but I should have known better. Normally Izuku would wonder at the fact that a total stranger has recognized him so easily, but considering that his photo was probably all over the news after his kidnapping, it's not all that surprising. It's fine, he says. Sorry for hitting you in the face with a garbage bag. It's no trouble. Tagada assures him. And don't worry, you only almost hit me. You have good reflexes for a first year. Izuku must do something funny with his face at that, because Tagada tilts his head. Something wrong? Izuku ducks. Nothing, just was that a compliment from you? Tagada blinks at him, dark eyes widening, and gives a sheepish but good-natured laugh that has Izuku grinning in spite of himself. I guess that was a little self-serving of me. Let me try that again. He holds out a hand. Tagada Mirio, third year. It's a pleasure to meet you. Suddenly it clicks. You're the pants guy. It's either that or the gobsmacked look on Tagada's face that has Aizawa making an odd wheezing noise before stepping away. If there's no more trouble, then I'll be going. Get back when you're done, Midoriya. Izuku is too focused on his burning face to answer before Aizawa leaves. Sorry. Forget I said that, it's just, I've seen, sports festivals. From previous years. That you were in. And you were you were pretty memorable. Because whenever you used your quirk, you'd lose his voice trails off weakly. Right, Tagada says, and Izuku wants to shrivel up and die. I'm Midoriya Izuku, he says. I guess you already knew that. Yeah. Ray is rolling her eyes so hard he's sure they'll roll right out of her head if she isn't careful. You're a little familiar, Tagada admits. Izuku winces. From the Kamino thing, right? Well, that and you're not the only one who watches sports festivals. Though in my case, I had to watch your footage after the fact. Tagada grins at him. You were pretty memorable yourself, though, thankfully for a different reason than me. Millimeter HN. Yeah. Izuku shrugs off the overwhelming desire to phase through the floor, which, considering the company he's keeping right now, anyway, it was nice to meet you, but I have to, he glances at the spilled trash and the ruined bag. Oh, let me help, Tagada says, stepping over to help gather the garbage. You don't have to. It's the least I can do, Tagada says. I'm the one who made you spill it, after all. It's a two-person job at this point, anyway. He's right, it's one thing to gather the trash back into the bag, and another to carry it along while keeping anything from escaping through the rip. Eventually they give it up as a lost cause, and Tagada races off and returns with a fresh bag. When Izuku insists on carrying it all himself once it's full again, Tagada insists on leading the way so he won't get lost. They're nearly to the dumpsters when Tagada speaks up. I can hear you burning with questions from here. There's no need to be shy. I like meeting new people, and you seem interesting. You walked through walls, right? Izuku blurts out. Tagada perks up at this, and Izuku tries not to fidget with excitement at finding someone who's happy to talk to him about quirks. Among other things, my quirk's called permeation, and it lets me render myself intangible. Good for evading attacks, but sadly it only affects my body, so I literally phase through everything. Hence the pants. Please forget I said that. Of course, Midoriya-kun. Izuku hasn't had the best experiences with upperclassmen, but Tagada is friendly and gregarious and doesn't even talk down to him. Even Rei, wary as she was at first, is soon prancing around him, teasing him with the faint breezes she creates just by moving, examining the bright logo on his jacket. She likes him, and now that Izuku knows she is, or was, an empath, her opinion of people means so much more. That's that, then, Tagada says, once the trash is where it needs to be. Sorry, again. It was nice talking to you. You too, thanks for your help, Izuku answers. No trouble at all. Tagada gives him a cheery clap on the shoulder. I'd better get back, then. See you, Izuku says automatically, then rethinks it. I mean, maybe. I dunno. Tagada shoots him a grin over his shoulder. You'd be surprised. Evening, Midoriya-kun. Bye, Tagada-senpai. It's only when he gets back to Class 1 AS block that he wonders what Tagada meant by surprised. It's bright and early, classes have only just started, and Tagada Mirio has not set foot in these particular hallways for 2 years now. So much has happened since then, he feels like a different person now. Nejaya alternates between wandering ahead and lagging behind, humming to herself as she stares at whatever catches her fancy, from an interesting poster on a bulletin board to a sparrow on a branch outside the window. Nejaya's always like that. She's clever and powerful, and Mirio likes her company, but he has to wonder why she got picked to give a presentation in front of a class full of first-years. Of course, the same can be said for Tamaki. You could have dapped out, you know, Mirio points out as delicately as he can. It's not that he minds Tamaki clinging to his arm like a lifeline, but he's also got that look on his face like he's walking to the gallows, and it's a little worrying. Fat said I should work on talking to people, Tamaki mumbles. He said class presentations were good practice. Don't worry about it, Mirio assures him. Not every hero has to be good at charming crowds. Not even Sir likes it very much. That doesn't seem to help much, so he tries a different angle. But I think you'll do fine. They are just first years, remember? We were first years once. Remember what I was like as a first year? Just imagine that version of me sitting with them, cheering you on. You'll do great. Tamaki ducks his head further and mumbles something about too bright, and Nejaya pops into Mirio's personal space with her usual brand of cheery tactlessness. Yeah, Tamaki, you'll be fine, she chirps. All you have to do is talk about your internship. And you love your internship almost as much as Mirio does. Have you guys asked each other out yet? Tamaki makes a noise like steam escaping a kettle, and Mirio tactfully shifts between them as a buffer. Nejaya, we've said it before, we're not. We're here. Nejaya cheers and darts through the open doorway labeled Class 1A. She reminds him of a hummingbird, flitting from one desk to the next, taking in each underclassman at her own energetic pace, firing off questions that she doesn't expect answers to. Tamaki lets go of him as they walk in, though Mirio can still feel the nervousness rolling off of him. He spots Midoriya sitting near the back and shoots him a grin, trying not to laugh at the bewildered look on Midoriya's face. They only just met 3 days ago, and Mirio doubts he knew they'd be meeting again so soon. Aizawa introduces them and hands things off to them, or off to Mirio, at least. Tamaki's fragile nose fail him, and Nejaya is fascinated with the tiny horns and pink skin on one of the girls sitting near the front. That's okay, if he takes charge, then they can add their own points. Starting with a deep breath, Mirio gives a rundown of internships. They're a more focused version of the post-sports festival field training they've already done, and an opportunity to use the connections they made to gain experience. Real experience. Nejaya chimes in from time to time, and even Tamaki screws up his courage to add a few details of his own, and Mirio couldn't be more proud. He's about 2 minutes in when he realizes that something's going a bit wrong. Some of the kids are paying attention. Midoriya and the brown-haired girl sitting in front of him seem to be hanging on to his every word. But quite a few of them are looking at him with the blank expressions of bored students staring off into space. There's one boy who isn't looking at him at all. Midoriya recognizes him as the winner of the first-year sports festival. There's a problem here, and it's not hard to discern if one considers this particular class's track record. They've seen more villain action than any other first-year class that UA has ever had. They've had experience with villains. A lot of them probably don't think much of what this kind of training can offer. There's an obvious solution, of course. If telling them doesn't work, then why not show them? 10 minutes later, with Aizao's leave, they are all dressed for athletics and gathered in one of UA's training gyms. The others are sitting this out. Neji's quirk is a bit too heavy on brute force and distraction for a display like this, and Tamaki hasn't eaten anything useful yet. It's a simple enough demonstration. Midoriya invites 19 first-year hero students to attack him. Now, Midoriya doesn't know Bakugo Katsuki personally, but is also not at all surprised that he's the only one of them who doesn't hesitate. The first-year leads with his swinging right hand impressively fast. Midoriya goes intangible from the waist up, and the explosive attack passes harmlessly through him but reduces his shirt to charcloth. He gives Bakugo a moment of bewilderment before he drops down beneath the floor. This part used to terrify him when he was little. Permeation renders him completely intangible, down to every cell, and not just for solid matter. Light passes through his retinas, air passes through his lungs, sound waves pass through his eardrums. When he gives himself so completely to his quirk, he is blind, deaf, and suffocating. Luckily, it has an interesting side effect. When he releases his quirk, rather than getting trapped in the floor, he shoots straight out and up. With practice, coordination, and a little foresight, he can aim just so. In this case, he can aim his trajectory directly into the first-year student above him. Bakugo goes down in that one attack, dazed, disoriented, and retching a little. That might have been overkill, but judging by the way the kid is glaring at him, is probably all right. The rest of the class rallies, alarmed into action by Bakugo's quick defeat, and Midoriya dives into the floor again. He aims first for the close-range fighters, then for the long-range fighters, and they are unprepared. Maybe they've never faced an enemy that they could neither see nor hit. Some are quick, others are lucky, but it's like Sir says, nothing beats cold hard experience. Eventually, most of them are out of commission, dazed or incapacitated by his quick and efficient assault. The only students that he hasn't taken down are Midoriya, who's watching him with an almost unblinking stare, and Todoroki, who's standing off to the side without joining in. Midoriya glances at the latter just in time to see him cup his hands around his mouth and call out the driest encouragement he's ever heard. Punch him in the throat, Midoriya. Midoriya shoots him a quick glare, though there isn't any real venom behind it. There's a bruise blooming on his jaw where Midoriya managed to clip in. You bringing that up now? It's either that or watch your surroundings better. How about you get over here and join in? Cut, I don't have my provisional license. Banter is all well and good, but it makes for a tempting distraction. Midoriya dives beneath the floor again and moves, aiming in the direction that he knows Midoriya was standing. He shoots up from beneath again, bracing himself for the inevitable impact, but he finds Midoriya out of his reach, still watching him intently. The younger boy's lips move, and Midoriya barely hears what he's muttering. Stay on him, stay on him, stay on him, don't lose him for even a second. Midoriya vanishes for another attack, and Midoriya dodges him yet again. No matter how Midoriya attacks, or from which direction, Midoriya's eyes are never anywhere but fixed on him. In spite of himself, Midoriya grins. He can't tell whether it looks flashy or comical, launching himself from the floor again and again while Midoriya dodges him. It only takes a few for Midoriya to realize his game. One way or another, Midoriya has a way to predict him, and his minimal dodging expends far less energy than Midoriya's attacks. Midoriya's trying to wear him down. Well, that won't do at all. The next time Midoriya comes up, he stays up. Midoriya is quick and clever, but he doesn't have a game plan for direct combat, and Midoriya doesn't give him time to think of one. He ends the fight with a move he learned from Sir, and steps back to let Midoriya recover and get his wind back. That was impressive, he says, and hopes he doesn't sound condescending about it. I mean that, it was really good. Thanks, Midoriya wheezes. By some miracle Midoriya managed to keep his pants this time, though he does have to retrieve his burnt shirt to put it back on. In any case, that's the point I was trying to make, he says, turning back to address the others. Versatility. Classroom training is necessary for building up your skills, but internships take away the controlled environment that comes of learning from teachers and simulations. It enables you to adapt more quickly to unfamiliar situations and opponents so that you aren't caught off guard by every new battle. I hope that makes sense. Looking around, he sees that he's garnered the desired reaction. Most of them are looking on with renewed interest. The redhead with the hardening quirk looks ready to burst from excitement. Midoriya shuffles past him, still favoring the leg that Midoriya kicked to take him down, and takes a few back slaps and head ruffles from his classmates. Midoriya watches his back, pursing his lips against the bright smile that wants to take over his face. A chill passes through him, startling him. It's not an ominous feeling, it's really not that bad at all. But it's unfamiliar, like having a quirk used on him, or being watched, or someone giggling at him behind his back. He looks, but there's no one there. All Might asked to speak with him after class that day. Not in the usual room or at the dawns, but on the jogging path that winds through the campus grounds. You wanted to talk to me, Izuku says cautiously when they meet. He doesn't like the look on All Might's face. It's the same look he had before they had their conversation about All for One, and this time Izuku doesn't know anything ahead of time. He looks to Nana for help, but she nods toward All Might. We would have had this conversation once you were healed from Kamina, but then you opened up to him, she says. Just listen, okay? Listen and keep an open mind. Because that's not ominous at all. They walk together down the wooded hill that surrounds UA until they are well away from the campus proper. It's a little better like this when they are out in the open and walking the school grounds instead of cooped up in that soundproofed room. It mustn't be that dire, then, right? If this is a conversation that All Might can have with him outside, then it can't be that bad. No earth-shattering secrets. What do you know of the hero Night Eye? All Might asks, a little abruptly. Izuku looks at him, surprised. That's not at all how he expected this conversation to start. Night Eye, you mean your former sidekick Night Eye? Is there another that I'm not aware of? Right, Izuku says sheepishly. Sir Night Eye. He's a little obscure and not very highly ranked. But that's mostly because he's not in the public eye very much now that he doesn't work with you anymore. I don't think anyone even knows what his quirk is. He almost qualifies as an underground hero, except a lot of his sidekicks end up rising to prominence. His agency's pretty sought after by new heroes who want to make a name for themselves, but he's supposed to have really strict standards. All Might heaves a sigh. That he does, he says, as if to himself. Actually, outside of actual pro heroes, most people just know him as your former sidekick, Izuku continues. People used to speculate a lot about him until he struck out on his own six years ago. His voice trails off as realization strikes. He doesn't think about Night Eye often, so he's never made the connection until now. Yes, All Might says. 6 years ago. Did you still work with him sometimes after he left your agency? Izuku asks cautiously. No. All Might's mouth tightens a little as they continue their walk. No, I never had the occasion. But Night Eye and I worked together for years before my injury. And very well, might I add. All Might's voice takes on a wistful note. Very well. Most of my best successors would have been impossible without him. In fact, he was more or less the brains of the operation, more often than not. That's that's kind of incredible, Izuku admits. I mean, I guess I always assumed he was learning from you. You know. But I guess that's not giving him enough credit. He chews this over, trying to fit this new information into his preconceptions. Why are you telling me this? All Might stops walking. They're alone, not even ghosts hang around in these woods. The only ones besides themselves are Nana and Rei. I don't think I need to tell you that this stays between us, he says. Not only for our sakes, but for the sake of an old and dear friend. I kind of figured, Izuku says. And All Might looks pained. And I'm sorry. This is another one of those things that I should have told you sooner. Not because of the danger it might pose, but I did not want to cause you pain. Oh, okay. Izuku looks to Nana for help again and finds none. He takes a deep breath and steels himself. Okay. Whatever it is, I'll be fine. I promise. All Might nods. Night Eye kept his quirk a secret from the public for a reason. It was always an ace in the hole, our ace in the hole, when we worked together. It was an advantage that no villain could match, that few heroes could match. A form of clairvoyance, so powerful, so sharp, that his predictions were always accurate. Inescapably so. Believe me, we experimented with it in the early days. He predicted something, Izuku murmurs. Something terrible. All Might won't meet his eyes. My boy, he predicted my death. The ground beneath Izuku's feet seems to vanish, the world tilts on its axis, and for a moment Izuku's mind is empty. He comes back with cool hands on his cheeks. Nana is there, steadying him, speaking softly until he can register words again. When? He asks as soon as his voice comes back. How? He used his quirk on me after I defeated All for One, when I had newly recovered from my injuries. He must not have looked for long once he realized what he was seeing, because he couldn't offer any details. Only that I would die in a fight with a terrible villain in 6 or 7 years. That was 6 years ago. Izuku's mind swims. That was you. The silence that follows presses down on him like a cold hand, crushing him toward the earth. A nearby fence post gives him a place to lean. Maybe that's why All Might stopped here to tell him. What happened? He asks. After he told you that. He implored me to retire, to give up hero work in the hopes that I could escape my fate, even though we knew that to be impossible. All Might's voice breaks. He begged me. Had refused. What about Kamino? Izuku raises his head. Kamino was, it could have, the lump in his throat grows too thick to speak around. Did you have him use it on you again, after you defeated All for One the second time? That was between 6 and 7 years after you first fought him. Maybe it's changed. All Might shuts his eyes. My scars were still fresh when he gave me that prediction. He saw what that battle had reduced me to, and it terrified him. When I refused to listen to him, he said that he couldn't just stand by and watch me die. We haven't spoken since. The boy is quiet for a long time. He no longer looks like he'll fall without the fence post's help, but Toshinori can't read what's on his face. Is there anything else? His voice wavers. Toshinori hesitates, lips pursed, wondering if he should leave this part out, but no. He deserves the truth, as whole as Toshinori can make it. I misspoke, he says. Night Eye and we have communicated recently. Nothing so dire as what he told me back then, but he did reach out to me, for the first time in years. It was before this year started, before you and I crossed paths. He contacted me to tell me that he had found a worthy successor for One for All. The boy stiffens at this. I was on my way to meet with the candidate when I pursued a villain and found my way beneath a certain bridge. I made up my mind on you that day, and I didn't make it to that meeting. Izuku stares at him, wide-eyed, and Toshinori's heart sinks with worry and shame. It's not a pleasant thing to think of, that his discovery of Izuku was an accident, Izuku says, his voice hushed. You chose me, you found me, by accident. It was all just luck and timing. Toshinori steps closer to him, and his voice turns steely. I have never regretted it, he tells him. You've only ever exceeded my expectations since I met you, an accident or not, his voice trails off. He had expected distress, dismay, even anger, but instead Izuku meets his words with a shaky smile. Good, he says. I'm glad. That's what I always thought. You always. Toshinori says. What to you? It was an accident. Izuku's voice trembles with hope. None of this was planned. It wasn't meant to be, it was an accident. He pauses and swipes his hand across his eyes. All Might, thank you. I mean it. Thank you for telling me. It must have been hard, but I'm glad. I got scared for a second, but I'm okay now. It's going to be okay. Toshinori isn't quite sure what's going through his head, but he can tell when his student needs comfort. He pulls the boy into a hug, and Izuku's arms wrap around his middle, careful to avoid the scar that still pains him. You're not going to die, Izuku tells him, and it's not the shaky uncertainty of faint hope. His student's voice is steady and certain. I know there's something to look out for, now. But you aren't going to die. Toshinori holds him tighter. I won't if I can help it, he says. When I first heard it, I made my peace with it. I was willing to run toward that future and meet it as long as I left behind a successor. But then I met you. And I'm not willing to leave you behind anymore. A sob builds in the back of his throat, and he swallows it so that he can continue speaking. I thought it had caught up with me at Kamina, but I defied it. You helped me defy it, and because of that, I'm still here. And I don't intend to run toward it anymore. Even if the future is set in stone, I'll fight it. Izuku pushes back out of his arms. It's not, he says. I don't believe that. The future doesn't work like that. I know it doesn't. There's such conviction in his voice. He sounds so sure of this, like it's an unshakable truth on which his entire world turns. It makes Toshinori believe it a little more, too.